The sun wasn't supposed to feel like this in June. It wasn't supposed to sit on your shoulders like a living thing, pressing down until your knees wanted to buckle. But that's Wyoming for you. It doesn't care what you think it should do. Ethan Cade had been standing at the edge of Miller's Crossing for 3 days, watching the eastern road like it owed him money. His daughter Clara sat on the porch behind him, 8 years old and already too familiar with waiting. She'd stopped asking when the lady was coming. That was worse than the asking. Pa? Her voice was small. Not yet, Clara. But you said, I know what I said. He didn't turn around. Couldn't. If he looked at her face, saw that hope still clinging there like morning frost on dead grass, he'd have to say something honest. And honest was the last thing either of them needed right now. The stage was 3 days late. 3 days in this country meant dead horses, broken axles, or worse. The route from Cheyenne wasn't supposed to be dangerous, relatively speaking, but supposed to didn't mean much when the territory itself was still being decided by men with guns and ideas about what belonged to who. Ethan had sent the money 4 months ago, had written the letter himself, sitting at the kitchen table with Clara sleeping upstairs, and a bottle of whiskey he didn't open because he'd promised himself he was done with that. The letter had been simple, honest even. I'm a rancher. I have land, cattle, and a daughter who needs a mother. I'm not offering romance. I'm offering work, safety, and a life that's yours if you want it. If you can live with that, there's a place for you here. He'd sent it to a matchmaking service in Boston. Hadn't expected an answer. When Lena Whitmore's letter arrived 6 weeks later, he'd read it twice before believing it was real. She'd written in clean, careful script, no flowery language, no promises she couldn't keep. Mr. Cade, I accept your terms. I'm a capable woman with teaching experience and no family left to speak of. I don't need love, but I need a purpose. If you can offer that, I'll be on the August stage. That was it. No photograph. No lengthy explanation. Just a woman who sounded as tired of her old life as he was of his. And now she wasn't here. Mr. Cade? Ethan turned. Thomas Miller stood in the doorway of the trading post, wiping his hands on a rag that had probably been white once. He was a thin man, all elbows and nervous energy, the kind who talked too much when he was worried. Stage ain't coming today neither, Thomas said. Talked to the depot in Rollins. They said it left on schedule 4 days back. 4 days. Should have been here 2 days ago, even with the heat. Ethan's jaw tightened. You send anyone to check the route? Can't spare the men. Got my own problems. Thomas shifted his weight. Look, I'm sorry about your arrangement. But these things happen. Could be she changed her mind. Women do that. The stage is missing, Thomas. That's not about her changing her mind. Could be she got off in Rollins. Could be. The stage is missing. Thomas fell quiet. Behind Ethan, Clara's footsteps creaked on the porch boards. I'm going to look for it, Ethan said. That's a fool's errand. You got no idea where it's... I know the route. I'll start at Copper Ridge and work back. Copper Ridge is 30 miles. In this heat, I'll be fine. Thomas shook his head slowly. You're doing this for a woman you never met. A woman who might not even be dead, just gone. You thought about that? Maybe she saw this place and decided she'd rather take her chances elsewhere. Ethan stepped close enough that Thomas had to look up to meet his eyes. The stage is missing. That means the driver's missing, the horses, anyone else who was on board. I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing it because it's right. It was a lie, but a useful one. Thomas nodded and stepped back. Take water, he said quietly. More than you think you need. Clara was standing at the top of the porch steps when Ethan turned around. She'd put on her sun hat, the one her mother had made before the fever took her 2 years ago, and she was holding his canteen. You're going to find her, Clara said. It wasn't a question. I'm going to try. And she's going to be okay. Ethan knelt down so they were eye to eye. Clara had her mother's face, sharp and serious, with eyes that saw more than they should. I don't know what I'm going to find out there, he said. You understand that? But you'll bring her back. Clara, you have to. There it was, the thing he'd been afraid to see. Not hope, desperation. Clara needed this woman to exist, to be real, to step off that stage and into their lives, because the alternative was continuing this half-life they'd been living since Sarah died. I'll do everything I can, Ethan said. She handed him the canteen. Mrs. Miller says she'll watch me, but I don't like her cooking. It's only for a few days. You promise? He shouldn't promise. Promises were for things you could control, and the frontier controlled you more than you controlled it. But Clara's hand was small in his, and her eyes were too big, and he was already standing up to leave. I promise. The ride to Copper Ridge took most of the day. Ethan's horse, a bay gelding named Sam, didn't complain, but the heat was getting to both of them by the time the sun started its slow descent toward the horizon. The route the stage took was well worn, cutting through relatively flat country before climbing into the foothills. In theory, it was safe. In practice, nothing out here was truly safe. Bandits were rare but not unheard of. Flash floods could appear out of nowhere. A broken wheel at the wrong time could mean death just as surely as a bullet. Ethan found the first sign just past Willow Creek. It was subtle, a scuff in the dirt where something heavy had dragged. Could have been anything, could have been nothing. But Ethan had spent 20 years reading this land, and something about the mark felt wrong. He dismounted and crouched next to it. The ground was hard-packed, baked by weeks of sun, but there, faint and almost invisible, was the edge of a wheel rut, deeper than it should be. Like the wagon had been moving fast or carrying too much weight, or both. Ethan followed the rut with his eyes. It veered off the main trail, heading south toward a stretch of open desert that nobody with sense would cross in summer. Well, hell, he muttered. Sam snorted in agreement. The sun was lower now, painting the landscape in shades of copper and gold. Beautiful, if you ignored the fact that beauty out here usually meant danger. The desert didn't care how pretty it looked while it killed you. Ethan remounted and turned south, following the rut. He found the wagon an hour before sunset. It was lying on its side in a shallow ravine, one wheel completely gone and the other shattered into pieces. The wooden frame had split open like a broken rib cage, spilling luggage and supplies across the sand. No horses, no driver, no passengers. Ethan's stomach dropped. He dismounted slowly, scanning the area. The ravine was maybe 12 feet deep, not enough to kill you outright if you were lucky, but plenty enough to break bones. The wagon must have hit something, maybe a rock outcropping hidden in the sand, and flipped. "Hello?" His voice echoed off the ravine walls. "Anyone here?" Nothing. He climbed down into the ravine, his boots sliding in the loose sand. The wagon was a mess. Trunks broken open, clothing scattered, a few books with their pages fluttering in the hot wind. There was a strong smell of leather, and something else, something metallic. Blood. Not much of it, but enough. A dark stain on the sand near the driver's bench, already dried to a rust-brown crust. Ethan crouched next to it, his jaw tight. Someone had been hurt. Maybe badly. He stood and circled the wagon, looking for more signs. The luggage was mostly women's clothing, dresses, undergarments, a few personal items. One trunk had L. Whitmore stenciled on the side in black paint. Lena's trunk. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside were more dresses, all practical and well-made. A few books, teaching primers, a Bible, a worn copy of something called Wuthering Heights. At the bottom was a small leather journal, tied shut with a ribbon. He didn't open it. Whatever was in there wasn't his business, not yet, anyway. But the trunk being here meant she'd been on this wagon, which meant she was somewhere nearby. Dead, probably, but maybe... He stopped, turned slowly. There. 20 feet from the wagon, leading away from the ravine. Drag marks. They were faint. If the sun hadn't been at exactly the right angle, throwing long shadows across the sand, he wouldn't have seen them at all. But there they were, two parallel lines maybe 6 inches apart, with occasional handprints on either side. Someone had crawled out of the ravine. Ethan's heart was hammering now. He followed the marks, moving slowly, his eyes locked on the sand. The drag marks led west, toward a cluster of rocks about 100 yards away. The sun was almost down now, the sky turning deep purple at the edges. He walked faster. The marks stopped at the rocks. Ethan circled them once, then twice, his breath coming short. Nothing. No body. No blood. Just sand and stone and... Wait. There. A boot. Just the toe of it, barely visible behind a larger boulder. Ethan moved around the rock. She was lying on her back, her face turned toward the sky. Her dress was torn and filthy, covered in sand and dried blood. Her hair, dark brown, almost black, was loose and tangled around her face. One leg was bent at an angle that made Ethan's stomach turn. He dropped to his knees beside her. "Hey!" His voice came out rough. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck, just below the jaw, and held his breath. There. A pulse. Faint and irregular, but there. She was alive. "Jesus Christ," Ethan whispered. Her skin was burning up, her lips cracked and bleeding from dehydration. Both legs were clearly broken, the left one badly, with bone pressing against the skin in a way that made him look away. She must have crawled from the wagon with those injuries, must have dragged herself through 100 yards of desert sand with shattered bones grinding together. The thought made him dizzy. "All right," he said, more to himself than to her. "All right, we're getting you out of here." He stood and ran back to Sam, his mind already calculating. It was nearly dark. He couldn't move her safely in the dark. One wrong step and he could make her injuries worse, or kill her outright. But leaving her here wasn't an option either. The night would bring cold, and in her condition she wouldn't survive it. He needed shelter, a fire, water, and he needed it fast sheets. There was an old line shack about 3 miles north. Ethan had used it before during Roundup, back when he'd had enough cattle to need Roundup. It wasn't much, 4 walls and a roof barely, but it would keep the wind off and give him a place to work. He brought Sam down into the ravine and loaded what he could from the wagon, blankets, a few pieces of clothing, Lena's trunk. Then he rode back to the rocks where she lay. Moving her was going to hurt. There was no way around that. Ethan knelt beside her again and slid his arms under her back and knees, trying to support the broken legs as much as possible. She didn't wake, didn't make a sound, and that worried him more than anything. Unconsciousness was the body's mercy, but too much of it meant the brain was shutting down. He lifted her carefully. She weighed almost nothing. The ride to the line shack was 3 miles of pure hell. Sam moved slowly, sensing the delicate cargo, but every step jolted Lena's body and made Ethan's jaw clench tighter. He talked to her the whole way, his voice low and steady. "Almost there. Just a little further. You're doing fine. We're going to get you warm, get some water in you. You're going to be all right." He didn't know if she could hear him, didn't know if it mattered, but he kept talking anyway. The line shack appeared out of the darkness like a ghost. Ethan kicked the door open and carried Lena inside, laying her on the narrow cot against the far wall. The place smelled like dust and old wood, but it was solid. That was enough. He got a fire going first, small, just enough for light and a little warmth. Then he soaked a cloth in water from his canteen and pressed it against Lena's lips. "Come on," he muttered. "You didn't crawl through the desert to die in a shack." A few drops made it past her lips. She swallowed reflexively, and Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. "That's it. Good." He gave her more water, a little at a time, until her breathing seemed to steady. Then he turned his attention to her legs. This was the part he'd been dreading. Ethan had set bones before. Horses, cattle, even his own arm once after a bad fall. But this was different. These breaks were bad, and he didn't have proper splints or bandages or anything resembling medical training, but he had to try. He cut away the fabric of her dress around the injuries, working carefully. The left leg was worse than he'd thought, a compound fracture with the bone pushing against the skin, red and swollen. The right leg was broken too, but cleaner, maybe fixable. "All right, Lena," he said quietly. "I'm sorry about this." He set the right leg first, pulling it straight and using pieces of wood from a broken crate as splints. She didn't wake, but her breathing hitched and her fingers curled into fists. The left leg took longer. Ethan had to push the bone back into place, feeling it grind under his hands, sweat running down his face despite the cool night air. When it was finally set and wrapped, his hands were shaking. He sat back against the wall and closed his eyes. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shack's loose boards. Sam was tied up under a small overhang, sheltered from the worst of it. Ethan should check on him, should make sure the fire didn't go out, should do a lot of things. Instead, he looked at the woman on the cot, Lena Whitmore, his mail-order bride, a stranger who'd traveled 1,000 miles to marry him and ended up broken in the desert. "You're a damn fool," he told her, "coming out here, thinking this would work." She didn't answer. But then again, he continued, so am I. She didn't wake that night, or the next day, or the day after that. Ethan stayed with her, leaving only to check on Sam and refill the canteen from a small spring about a mile east. He got water into her every few hours, sometimes just drops at a time. He changed the bandages on her legs, watching for signs of infection, the red streaks that meant blood poisoning, the smell that meant gangrene. So far, nothing. But so far didn't mean much. On the third night, her fever broke. Ethan woke to the sound of her breathing, different now, deeper and more regular. He moved to the cot and pressed his hand against her forehead. Still warm, but not burning. "Hey," he said. "You in there?" Her eyelids fluttered, opened. For a moment, she just stared at the ceiling, her eyes unfocused. Then she turned her head slowly and looked at him. "Where?" Her voice was barely a whisper, raw and painful. "You're safe," Ethan said. "You were in an accident. The stage went into a ravine." She blinked slowly, processing. "The driver?" "I don't know. I only found you." "How long?" 3 days since I found you. Maybe 5 since the crash." 5 days. She closed her eyes. "I thought I was dead." "You nearly were." "My legs. Broken. Both of them. I set them best I could, but you're going to need a real doctor." She didn't respond to that, just lay there, breathing carefully, like she was testing to see what hurt and what didn't. "What's your name?" she asked finally. "Ethan Cade." Her eyes opened again. "The rancher." "That's right." "You came looking for me." "The stage was late. I went to find it." "You didn't have to." "Yeah," Ethan said. "I did." She studied his face for a long moment. He wasn't sure what she was looking for, some sign that he was trustworthy maybe, or some proof that this wasn't another trap. Whatever it was, she must have found it, because she nodded slightly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We're still 3 miles from nowhere, and you can't walk." "Then I'll crawl." It should have sounded ridiculous, a woman with 2 broken legs talking about crawling through the desert. But something in her voice made it clear she wasn't joking. She'd already done it once. She'd do it again if she had to. "You won't have to crawl," Ethan said. "I'll get you to town. But not tonight. You need to rest." "How bad is it? The legs?" He hesitated. "Bad. The left one especially. I'm not a doctor, but will I walk again?" "I don't know." She absorbed that without flinching. "All right. All right? I've had worse." Ethan wanted to ask what could possibly be worse than this, but her eyes were already drifting closed again. Within minutes, she was asleep. Real sleep this time, not the unconscious void she'd been in before. He sat back against the wall and watched her breathe. She woke again just before dawn. Ethan was feeding the fire when he heard her shift on the cot. "Morning," he said. "Is it?" She sounded stronger, still weak, but present. "Just about." She pushed herself up on her elbows, wincing. "I need water." Ethan brought the canteen over and helped her drink. She took it slowly, swallowing carefully, her throat working. "Thank you." She handed it back. "I'm Lana, but I suppose you knew that. Found your trunk in the wagon." "Did you look inside?" "Only enough to confirm it was yours." "That's unusually respectful." "You want me to apologize?" "No." A faint smile crossed her face. "I want you to help me sit up properly. I'm tired of lying down." It took some maneuvering, but Ethan got her propped against the wall with blankets supporting her back. She looked around the shack, taking in the bare walls, the dirt floor, the cracks in the roof. "Not exactly the frontier palace I was promised," she said. "You were promised a ranch. This is just temporary." "How temporary?" "Depends how fast you heal." "And if I don't heal?" Ethan met her eyes. "Then we'll figure something else out." "You don't strike me as a man who figures things out. You strike me as a man who makes decisions and lives with them." "Maybe, but I'm adaptable." "That's a polite way of saying stubborn." "Takes one to know one. You crawled 100 yards with broken legs." "I didn't have much choice." "There's always a choice. You could have stayed with the wagon, waited for someone to find you." "No one was coming." "I came." She looked at him steadily. You didn't know that when you started crawling. Fair point. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the sun was rising, painting the desert in shades of gold and pink. Beautiful, if you didn't think about how hot it was going to get in a few hours. Can I ask you something? Lena said. Go ahead. Why did you really come looking for me? And don't say it was the right thing to do. Men don't risk their lives for strangers out of principle. Ethan considered lying. It would be easier, but something about the way she was looking at him, direct and unflinching, made lying feel pointless. I have a daughter, he said. Clara, she's 8. Her mother died 2 years ago, and she's been waiting for something to change. When your letter came, she got it in her head that you were going to fix everything, make us a family again. He paused. I couldn't go back and tell her you just disappeared. Couldn't let her keep waiting for someone who was never coming. Lena was quiet for a long moment. That's a lot of pressure to put on a stranger. I know. I'm not sure I can fix anything. I'm not even sure I can walk. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm just asking you to try. Try what? To be a wife? A mother? To be here. That's all. Whatever happens after that, we'll figure out. She shook her head slowly. You're an optimist. I didn't expect that. I'm not an optimist. I'm just out of options. That makes 2 of us. Oh. They stayed in the line shack for another week. Ethan wasn't sure if it was the right call medically, but moving Lena too soon seemed like a good way to kill her, and he'd already invested too much effort in keeping her alive to risk it now. During the day, he hunted for food, rabbits mostly, sometimes a sage hen if he got lucky. He boiled water and made thin soups that Lena could keep down. He changed her bandages twice a day, checking for infection, watching the swelling in her legs slowly decrease. At night, they talked. It started small, basic questions about where she was from, Boston, what she'd done there, taught at a girls' school, why she'd left, complicated. But as the days passed, the conversations deepened. My father was a merchant, Lena said one night, owned a shipping company, did well for himself until he didn't. What happened? He made a bad investment, lost almost everything. Then he had a stroke, died 6 months later. I'm sorry. Don't be. He wasn't a good man. He was just good at making money. What about your mother? Gone before I was old enough to remember her. Fever, I think. My father never talked about it. Ethan fed another piece of wood into the fire. So you were alone. I had the school, the students. But after my father died, his business partner, a man named Charles Whitlock, decided I needed protection. She said the word like it tasted bad. He proposed. Made it clear it wasn't really a proposal. He tried to force you. He tried. I refused. He didn't take it well. She paused. That's when I saw the advertisement for your matchmaking service. Seemed like a good exit. Out of the frying pan. Maybe. But at least this pan was my choice. Ethan understood that. He'd made his own escapes over the years, left his father's farm in Missouri, left a marriage that was falling apart even before Sarah got sick, left the idea that life was supposed to be easy or fair or anything other than hard. What about you? Lena asked. What made you write that letter? Clara. She needed a mother. That's not an answer. That's a reason. What made you write it? Ethan took a long breath. I was tired of doing everything alone, of watching my daughter grow up without softness. I can teach her to ride, to shoot, to work, but I can't teach her how to be gentle, how to trust people. He stopped. I couldn't teach her what Sarah would have taught her. Your wife. Yeah. You loved her. I did. Not at first. Ours was an arrangement too, in a way. But yeah, by the end, I loved her. And you think you can do that again? With me? Ethan looked at her. I don't know. Maybe. If you stay long enough. What if I can't walk? What if I'm stuck like this? Then you're stuck like this. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. I'm not going to promise you anything I can't control, but I can promise I won't leave you to die in the desert. And I can promise Clara will be glad to meet you, broken legs or not. Lena smiled faintly. You're a strange man, Ethan Cade. You're not the first person to say that. I doubt I'll be the last. On the 8th day, Ethan rigged a travois using branches and blankets and loaded Lena onto it as carefully as he could. She didn't complain, but he saw the way her jaw tightened every time Sam took a step and the travois jolted behind him. The ride back to Miller's Crossing took most of the day. By the time they arrived, half the town had gathered to watch. Word must have spread that Ethan Cade was bringing back his mail-order bride, and people were curious to see what kind of woman would agree to marry a man she'd never met. What they saw was a woman on a travois, pale and thin and broken. The whispers started immediately. Thomas Miller met them at the edge of town. "Jesus, Ethan, she looks half dead." "She's alive. That's what matters." "Does she need the doc?" "She needs a bed and rest. Doc can see her tomorrow." Thomas nodded slowly. "I'll tell Mary to prepare a room at the boarding house. Tell her I'll pay for it." "You sure? That could be weeks, the way she looks." "I'm sure." Ethan carried Lena into the boarding house himself, ignoring the stares and whispers. Mary Miller, Thomas's wife, had prepared a room on the ground floor, small but clean, with a real bed and windows that let in light. He laid Lena down carefully. "Thank you," she whispered. "Get some rest. I'll come by tomorrow." "Where are you going?" "Home. I need to see Clara." Lena's hand caught his wrist. Her grip was weak but insistent. "Ethan," he stopped. "Don't make her any promises you can't keep." "I won't. I mean it. If this doesn't work, if I can't be what she needs, don't let her blame herself." "She won't." "You don't know that." "No," Ethan admitted. "I don't, but I'll do my best." Lena held his gaze for a moment longer, then let go. "That's all anyone can do, I suppose." Clara was waiting on the porch when Ethan rode up. She didn't run to him the way she used to when she was younger, just stood there, her hands folded in front of her, watching. "Did you find her?" she asked. "I found her." "Is she dead?" "No, she's hurt, but she's alive." "When can I meet her?" "Soon. She needs to rest first." Clara nodded slowly. "What's she like?" Ethan dismounted and tied Sam to the post. "She's tough. Tougher than I expected." "Is she nice?" "I think so. But you'll have to decide that for yourself." "Okay," Clara hesitated. "Pa?" "Yeah?" "Are you glad you found her?" Ethan looked at his daughter, this small, serious person who'd been carrying too much weight for too long. "Yeah, Clara. I'm glad." She smiled then, just a little. But it was enough. The doctor arrived the next morning, a squat man named Henderson who'd been practicing medicine in Wyoming longer than most of the town had been standing. He had thick fingers that looked better suited to carpentry than surgery, but Ethan had seen him work before. The man knew what he was doing. Ethan waited outside the boarding house while Henderson examined Lena. Clara sat beside him on the steps, swinging her legs and pretending she wasn't nervous. "How long's he going to be?" she asked. "As long as it takes." "But what if—" "Clara." She went quiet. A few people passed on the street, most of them slowing down to stare. Word had spread fast. By now, everyone in Miller's Crossing knew about the crashed stage, the broken bride, the rancher who'd gone into the desert and somehow brought her back alive. The door opened behind them. Henderson stepped out, wiping his hands on a cloth that had seen too many uses. "Well?" Ethan stood. "She's stable. Fever's gone, which is good. The legs are another story." Henderson tucked the cloth into his belt. "The right one will heal. Might have a limp, but she'll walk. The left one." He trailed off. "Say it." "It's bad, Cade. Bone was pressing through the skin when you found her. You did a decent job setting it, better than I'd expect from someone without training, but there's damage, muscle, tendon. Even if it heals straight, she might not have full use of it." "Might not?" "I'm not making promises I can't keep. Best case, she walks with a cane. Worst case, she doesn't walk at all." Clara's hand found Ethan's. He squeezed it gently. "How long before we know?" Ethan asked. "Months. Maybe longer. She needs to stay off it completely for at least 6 weeks. After that, we'll see." Henderson glanced at Clara, then back at Ethan. "She wants to talk to you, alone." "I'll wait here," Clara said quickly. Ethan nodded and went inside. Lena was propped up in bed, her legs elevated on pillows. She looked better than she had yesterday, color in her face, eyes clear, but there was something tight around her mouth that hadn't been there before. "He told you," she said. "He told me." "Then you know I'm not going to be much use to you." Ethan pulled a chair over and sat down. "That's not what he said." "He said I might not walk. That's the same thing." "No, it's not." "Ethan, I came here to be a wife, a mother, to help run your house, teach your daughter, work. I can't do any of that if I'm stuck in bed." "You're not going to be stuck in bed forever. You don't know that." "Neither do you." She looked away, her jaw working. "This isn't what you signed up for." "I signed up for a woman willing to try." "That's still you, isn't it?" "Is it?" "I don't feel very willing right now. I feel like a burden." "Then feel like a burden. I don't care." "You should." "Well, I don't." Ethan leaned forward. "Listen to me. You crawled through 100 yards of desert with broken legs because you refused to die. You think I'm going to give up on you now because you might have a limp? It's not just a limp. I don't care what it is. You're here. You're alive. That's enough." Lena's eyes were wet, but she blinked the tears back. "You're a fool." "So I've been told." "I'm serious. You could send me back to Boston. Find someone else, someone whole." "I could, but I'm not going to." "Why not?" Ethan stood and walked to the window. Outside, Claire was sitting on the steps, picking at a loose thread on her dress. She looked small out there, smaller than she should. "Because Clara's been waiting for 2 years for things to get better," he said quietly. "And I'm tired of telling her to be patient. I'm tired of watching her pretend she's fine when she's not. You being here, broken legs and all, that's the first real thing that's happened to us since Sarah died. I'm not throwing that away because it's hard. That's not a good reason. It's the only one I've got." Lena was quiet for a long time. When Ethan turned back, she was looking at her hands, fingers twisted together in her lap. "I didn't tell you everything," she said finally, "about why I left Boston." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. If you're going to keep me, you should know what you're keeping." Ethan sat back down. Lena took a breath. "Charles Whitlock didn't just propose to me. He tried to force the issue. Told me if I didn't marry him, he'd make sure I lost my position at the school. Said he'd spread rumors. Make it so no one would hire me." She paused. "I refused anyway. So he did exactly what he promised, got me fired, made it so I couldn't find work anywhere in Boston. That's when you left." "That's when I ran. I didn't leave, Ethan. I ran, like a coward." "Leaving a bad situation doesn't make you a coward." "Doesn't it? I let him win. Let him take everything I'd built and destroy it because I was too afraid to fight back." "You're fighting back now. You're here." "I'm here because I had nowhere else to go." "I don't believe that." She looked at him sharply. "Why not?" "Because if you had nowhere else to go, you would have stayed in the desert, waited to die. But you didn't. You crawled. That was survival, not choice. It's the same thing." "No, it's not." Ethan shook his head. "You can tell yourself whatever you want, but I saw those drag marks. I saw how far you made it. That wasn't just survival. That was will." Lena opened her mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, she just stared at him, something unreadable in her expression. "You're impossible," she said finally. "So are you." "I suppose we deserve each other then." "I suppose we do." The corner of her mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close enough. "Your daughter's waiting outside," Lena said. "You should bring her in." "You sure?" "No, but do it anyway." Ethan stood and opened the door. Clara was on her feet before he could say anything. "Can I see her?" "She wants to meet you." Clara's eyes went wide. She smoothed down her dress, suddenly self-conscious. "Do I look okay?" "You look fine." "But what if she doesn't like me?" "She'll like you." "How do you know?" "Because I know." Clara took a deep breath, then walked past him into the room. Ethan followed, hanging back near the door. Lena was watching Clara with the same careful expression she'd given everything else, assessing, measuring, trying to figure out where she stood. "Hello," Lena said. "Hi." Clara's voice was small. "I'm Clara." "I know. Your father's told me about you." "He has?" "He said you're very patient and very brave." Clara blinked. I'm not brave. No? I heard you've been running a household by yourself for 2 years. That sounds brave to me. I just do what needs doing. That's what brave people say. Lena shifted slightly, wincing. I'm sorry I'm not what you expected. What do you mean? I mean, I'm broken. I can't walk, can't help the way I should. Clara frowned. Pa said you crawled through the desert. I did. With broken legs? Yes. That's stupid. Lena blinked. Then, to Ethan's surprise, she laughed. A real laugh, sharp and genuine. You're right, Lena said. It was incredibly stupid. But you did it anyway. I did. Why? Lena considered the question seriously. Because I didn't want to die out there. I wanted to live long enough to see what came next. And now you're here. Now I'm here. Clara took a step closer. Are you going to stay? I don't know. Do you want me to? Yes. Even though I'm broken? You're only broken if you stop trying. That's what Pa says. Lena glanced at Ethan, something soft in her expression. Your father's a wise man. Sometimes, Clara said. Other times, he's stubborn. I've noticed. Clara moved to the side of the bed, her earlier nervousness fading. Does it hurt? Your legs? Yes, but less than it did. Can I see? Clara, Ethan started. It's all right. Lena pulled back the blanket carefully, revealing the splints and bandages. The left leg was still badly swollen, the skin mottled with bruises. Clara studied it with the same serious expression she used for everything. Doctor, Henderson says you might not walk. He's right. But you might. Maybe. Then you will. How do you know? Because you didn't die in the desert. If you can do that, you can do anything. Lena's throat worked. She reached out and touched Clara's hand just briefly. Thank you. Clara nodded. Then without warning, she turned to Ethan. Can she come home with us? Not yet. She needs to stay here until she's stronger. How long? I don't know. Can I visit? Ethan looked at Lena. She nodded. You can visit, Ethan said. Every day? We'll see. Clara seemed satisfied with that. She turned back to Lena. I'll bring you books. Do you like books? I do. What kind? All kinds, but especially stories about people who survive impossible things. Clara smiled. I know some of those. They talked for another 10 minutes before Ethan finally pulled Clara away, promising they'd come back tomorrow. As they left, Ethan glanced back. Lena was watching them go, her expression unguarded for just a moment. She looked hopeful and terrified. He understood both. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Ethan would ride into town every morning, sometimes with Clara, sometimes alone. He'd check on Lena, bring her food, help Mary Miller change the bandages. In the afternoons, he'd work the ranch, fixing fences, moving cattle, doing the 100 small tasks that kept the place running. It wasn't easy. The ranch had been struggling even before he'd gone into the desert, and losing a week hadn't helped. But Ethan was used to hard work. It was the waiting that killed him, waiting to see if Lena would heal, waiting to see if she'd stay, waiting to see if any of this would actually work. Lena, for her part, was a difficult patient. She hated being bedridden, hated relying on others, hated the slow crawl of recovery. More than once, Ethan found her trying to stand on her own, sweat beading her forehead as she gritted her teeth against the pain. You're going to hurt yourself, he told her. I'm already hurt. You're going to make it worse. I don't care. Well, I do. She glared at him. You're not my keeper. No, but I'm the one who set those bones. I'd prefer they stay set. Then stop treating me like I'm made of glass. I'm not. You are. You and Mary and everyone else. You look at me like I'm about to shatter. Ethan pulled up a chair. You want honesty? Always. You scare the hell out of me. Lena blinked. What? Every time I come in here, I'm half convinced you're going to tell me you're done, that you're leaving, that this was a mistake. He paused. So, yeah, I'm careful, because I don't know what else to be. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, I'm not going anywhere. You say that now. I mean it. People change their minds.
Not about this. She shifted, wincing. I told you, I didn't come here because I had nowhere else to go. I came here because I wanted something different, something real. That hasn't changed just because my legs are broken. What if they don't heal? Then they don't heal. I'll figure it out. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She met his eyes. You asked me to try. I'm trying, but I need you to stop waiting for me to fail.
Ethan felt something loosen in his chest.
All right. All right? I'll stop waiting for you to fail.
Good. She lay back against the pillows, exhausted. Now help me sit up. I want to look out the window. He did, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to believe this might actually work. Clara visited almost every day, usually in the afternoons after she'd finished her chores. She'd bring books from the small collection at home, and she and Lena would read together, sometimes aloud, sometimes in comfortable silence. Ethan would watch them from the doorway sometimes, these two people who were supposed to be his family, trying to figure each other out. Clara was cautious at first, testing boundaries, seeing how much she could say before Lena pushed back. But Lena never did. She answered every question honestly, never talked down to Clara, never treated her like a child who needed protecting from the truth. It was exactly what Clara needed. And watching it happen, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Relief. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after they'd brought Lena to town, Clara came running into the boarding house, her face flushed with excitement. Lena, you have to see this. Lena looked up from the book she'd been reading. What is it? There's a bird outside. I've never seen one like it before. It's all blue and white and… Slow down. What kind of bird? I don't know. That's why you have to see it. Lena glanced at Ethan, who was leaning against the wall. I can't exactly walk outside, Clara. Then we'll bring you. Clara, I don't think… But Clara was already grabbing Ethan's arm. Pa, help me! Ethan sighed. This is a bad idea. Please? He looked at Lena. She was trying not to smile. Fine, he said. But if Henderson finds out, I'm blaming you. Between the two of them, they managed to get Lena into a chair and carry her outside. It was awkward and uncomfortable, and Lena's face went white more than once. But they made it to the porch. Clara pointed. There! See? It was a mountain bluebird perched on the railing not 10 feet away. It cocked its head, watching them with bright, curious eyes. It's beautiful, Lena said quietly. Right? I told you. They sat there for a while, the three of them, watching the bird until it finally flew away. When they carried Lena back inside, she was smiling. Thank you, she told Clara. For what? For reminding me there's more to see than this room. Clara beamed. That night, after Clara had gone to bed, Ethan sat with Lena in the dim lamplight. She's attached to you, he said. I noticed. That could be a problem if you leave. I told you I'm not leaving. I know what you told me, but saying it and meaning it are different things. Lena set down her book. What do you want from me, Ethan? A promise? A guarantee? I can't give you that. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'll walk again, or if I'll be any good at this, or if Clara will still like me in 6 months. But I'm here, and I'm trying. That has to be enough. It is enough. Then why do you keep asking? Because he was afraid. Because every good thing in his life had been taken away, and he was waiting for this one to disappear too. Because he didn't trust himself to believe in anything permanent anymore. But he couldn't say any of that. So instead he said, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. We are. Good. She watched him for a moment. You're afraid of this. Of me. I'm not. You are. I can see it. Every time you look at me, there's this distance. Like you're already preparing for me to leave. That's not true. Isn't it? Ethan stood and walked to the window. Outside, the street was empty, the town settling into sleep. My wife died in this room, he said quietly. Lena went still. Sarah. She got sick 2 years ago. Fever that wouldn't break. Henderson tried everything, but he trailed off. She died right there, in that bed. And I sat here and watched it happen and couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. Ethan, so yeah, maybe I'm afraid. Maybe I'm waiting for this to fall apart because that's all I know how to do anymore.
He turned to face her. But I'm still here, and I'm still trying, so if that's not good enough, you can tell me now. Lena's expression softened. It's good enough. You're sure? I'm sure. They looked at each other across the room, two broken people trying to build something whole. I think we're going to be all right, Lena said. Yeah? Yeah. Ethan wanted to believe her.
And for the first time in a long time, he thought maybe he could. By the 6th week, Lena was starting to put weight on her right leg. It was slow, painful work, but she was making progress. The left leg was still weak, the muscle wasted from weeks of disuse, but she could move it now without crying out. Henderson was cautiously optimistic. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't push too hard, but don't baby it either. That's helpful, Lena muttered. I'm a doctor, not a miracle worker. The day Lena took her first real steps, Clara was there. So was Ethan. Lena gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles white, and lifted her right foot. Easy, Ethan said. I know what I'm doing. You really don't. She shot him a look, then took a step. Her leg shook, threatened to give out, but she held it, took another step, then another. By the time she made it across the room, she was sweating and pale, but she was grinning. I did it. You did, Ethan said. Clara was bouncing on her toes. Do it again. Maybe tomorrow. But, Clara, let her rest. Lena lowered herself back into the chair, breathing hard. She's right, though. I should do it again. You just walked for the first time in 2 months. Take a break. I've been taking breaks for 2 months. Lena, I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Her hands were shaking, and there were tears in her eyes that she was trying hard to hide. But Ethan recognized the look on her face. It was the same look she'd had when he found her in the desert. Determination. Pure, stubborn, reckless determination. All right, he said, but if you fall, I'm not catching you. I won't fall. She did fall, twice, but she got back up both times, and by the end of the afternoon, she'd walked the length of the room 6 times. That night, Ethan stayed late. Clara had already gone home with Mary Miller, who'd agreed to watch her for the evening. It was just him and Lena, the lamplight casting long shadows on the walls. I need to ask you something, Lena said. Go ahead. When I can walk again, really walk, not just shuffle around a room, what happens? What do you mean? I mean, do I stay here? Do I go to the ranch? What are we doing, Ethan? He'd been avoiding this question for weeks. Hadn't wanted to push, hadn't wanted to assume. But she was right. They needed to talk about it. I want you to come to the ranch, he said, when you're ready. I want you to meet the life I'm offering. See if it's something you can live with. And if it's not, then we'll figure something else out. You keep saying that, we'll figure it out, but you never say how. Because I don't know how. I just know I'm not giving up. Lena looked down at her hands. I'm scared. Of what? Of disappointing you. Of disappointing Clara. Of getting there and realizing I can't do this. You won't. You don't know that. No, Ethan admitted. I don't. But I know you didn't crawl through the desert to give up now. That's different. That was survival. So is this. She met his eyes. Is it? Yeah, it is. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. I'll come to the ranch, Lena said finally, when I'm ready. But I need you to promise me something. What? If it doesn't work, if I can't be what you need, you'll tell me. You won't just let me stay out of obligation. I can promise that. Good. She smiled faintly. Because I've had enough of people keeping me around for the wrong reasons. That won't happen. I'll hold you to that. 2 weeks later, Lena walked out of the boarding house on her own. She had a cane, a sturdy piece of oak that Ethan had carved himself, and her left leg still dragged slightly, but she was walking. Clara was waiting with the wagon, practically vibrating with excitement. You're really coming home? I'm really coming, Lena said. For good? Lena glanced at Ethan. He nodded. For good, Lena said. Clara let out a whoop and threw her arms around Lena's waist. Lena staggered, caught off guard, but managed to stay upright. Easy, Ethan said. She's still healing. I'm fine, Lena said, but her voice was thick. The ride to the ranch was quiet. Lena sat in the back of the wagon watching the landscape roll by.
The endless stretches of grass, the distant mountains, the sky so big it seemed to swallow everything else. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's harsh," Ethan corrected. "Beautiful doesn't last long out here." "Maybe, but it's still beautiful." When they reached the ranch, Lena stood in the yard for a long moment, taking it all in. The house was small but solid, built from rough-cut timber with a stone chimney. The barn was larger, showing signs of recent repair. A few cattle grazed in the distance, and chickens scratched in the dirt near the porch. "This is it," Ethan said. "This is what I've got." Lena turned to him. "It's perfect. It's not. It is." Clara grabbed Lena's hand. "Come on, I'll show you your room." Lena let herself be pulled inside, her cane tapping against the wooden floor. Ethan followed, watching as Clara gave her the full tour. The kitchen, the sitting room, the small bedroom upstairs that Lena would use. "It's not much," Clara said, "but Pa said we could fix it up, make it nice." "It's already nice," Lena said. "Really?" "Really." That night they had dinner together, the first real meal they'd shared as a family. It was simple food, nothing fancy, but it tasted better than anything Ethan had eaten in months. After Clara went to bed, Ethan and Lena sat on the porch, watching the stars. "You think this is going to work?" Lena asked. "I don't know, but I want it to." "Me too." They sat in silence for a while, the night sounds of the frontier settling around them. "Thank you," Lena said quietly, "for not giving up on me." "Thank you for not giving up on yourself," she smiled. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" "Yeah," Ethan said, "we are." And for the first time since Sarah died, he felt something like hope. The first week at the ranch was harder than Lena had expected. Not the physical work, though that was difficult enough with her legs still healing, but the simple fact of living with two people who had their own rhythms, their own unspoken rules, their own way of moving through the world that didn't include her. She'd wake up before dawn to the sound of Ethan moving around downstairs, boots heavy on the floor, the smell of coffee already filling the house. By the time she made it down the stairs, still slow, still careful, he'd be halfway through breakfast, and Clara would be setting the table with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd been doing it too long. "Morning," Lena would say. "Morning," they'd answer, and then the silence would stretch out until someone found something safe to talk about. It wasn't hostile. It was just careful, like they were all walking on ice that might crack at any moment. On the fourth morning, Lena burned the eggs. She'd insisted on cooking breakfast, told Ethan she needed to start earning her keep. He'd hesitated, then agreed, and she'd felt a small surge of victory. Until she got distracted trying to work the unfamiliar stove and the eggs turned black and stuck to the pan. "Damn it," she muttered, scraping at them with a spatula. Clara appeared in the doorway. "You're burning them." "I know I'm burning them. Pa likes his eggs soft." "I know that too." "Then why are they black?" Lena set down the spatula harder than necessary. "Because I'm still learning this stove. And because I only have one good leg and standing makes me dizzy. And because I haven't cooked for anyone but myself in 10 years and I'm out of practice." She took a breath. "And because apparently I'm terrible at this." Clara blinked. Then unexpectedly, she smiled. "Ma burned the eggs too, all the time." "She did?" "Yeah, Pa used to say she could teach a whole classroom but couldn't fry an egg to save her life." Clara moved to the stove. "Here, you crack them. I'll watch the heat." They worked together, and this time the eggs came out right. When Ethan came in from the barn, he stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Lena at the counter, Clara at the stove, both of them focused on the task. "Something smells good," he said carefully. "Don't get used to it," Lena replied. "Clara had to save them." "I helped," Clara corrected. "That's different." They ate breakfast together, and for the first time, the silence didn't feel quite so heavy. Later that morning, Lena was sitting on the porch with her leg elevated, Henderson's orders, when a wagon appeared on the eastern road. She recognized Mary Miller's profile, and beside her sat another woman Lena hadn't met. "Company," she called toward the barn. Ethan emerged, wiping his hands on his pants. He squinted at the approaching wagon. "That's Mary, and Sarah Hutchins." "Who's Sarah Hutchins?" "Banker's wife. Runs most of the social organizing in town." He paused. "She's also the biggest gossip within 50 miles. "Wonderful."
The wagon pulled up and Mary climbed down with the ease of someone who'd been doing it her whole life. Sarah Hutchins was slower, more careful, her dress too fine for a ranch visit.
"Lena!" Mary's voice was warm. "Look at you up and around. How are the legs?" "Getting there. Slowly." "That's the spirit," Mary gestured to her companion. "This is Sarah Hutchins. Sarah, this is Lena Whitmore. Well, I suppose it'll be Lena Cade soon enough." Sarah's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How lovely to meet you. We've heard so much." "Have you?" "Oh, yes. The whole town's been talking about the poor mail-order bride who nearly died in the desert." Sarah's gaze swept over Lena's cane, the way she kept her left leg still. "Such a tragic story." "I'm still alive," Lena said evenly, "so it could be worse." Of course. And it's so admirable that Mr. Cade took you in despite, well." She waved a hand vaguely. Ethan had gone very still. Lena could feel the tension radiating off him even from across the porch. "Despite what?" Lena asked.
Despite the circumstances, a woman in your condition, unable to properly fulfill her duties as a wife. It must be quite the burden for him. The air went cold. Mary made a small sound of protest, but Sarah continued, oblivious or uncaring. "I just think it's important to be realistic about these things. Marriage is hard enough without adding physical limitations to the mix. And with a child to consider, Mrs. Hutchins." Lena's voice was quiet, but it cut through Sarah's words like a blade. "I appreciate your concern, but my relationship with Ethan and Clara is none of your business. I'm simply trying to help." "No, you're not. You're trying to make yourself feel important by tearing down someone you don't know." Lena stood, using her cane for support. "I may not be able to run a ranch the way you think I should, but I'm here. I'm trying. And that's more than most people can say."
Sarah's face flushed red. "Well, You should probably go now," Ethan said. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "Thank you for stopping by." Mary was already climbing back into the wagon, looking mortified. Sarah followed, her spine rigid with indignation. As the wagon pulled away, Lena sank back into her chair, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry," Ethan said. "For what?" "For her. For bringing you into this. For—" "Don't." Lena looked at him. "Don't apologize for other people's cruelty. It's not your fault. Still, you shouldn't have to deal with that." "I've dealt with worse." She managed a tight smile. "At least she said it to my face." Clara had been watching from the window. She came out now, her expression fierce. "I don't like her." "That makes two of us," Lena said. "Three," Ethan added. Clara sat down next to Lena. "You're not a burden." "Thank you, Clara." "I mean it. You help. You cook, even when you burn things. And you read to me, and you're teaching me fractions even though I hate them." She paused. "And you make Pa smile. He hasn't done that in a long time." Lena's throat tightened. She glanced at Ethan, who was suddenly very interested in the horizon. "Well," Lena said quietly, "he makes me smile too." That evening, after Clara had gone to bed, Ethan found Lena in the kitchen. She was standing at the counter, staring at nothing. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar." She laughed, but it came out hollow. "That woman, Sarah, she said what everyone's thinking. She's a bitter old crow who has nothing better to do than make other people feel small." "Maybe, but she's not wrong. I am limited. I can't do half the things a ranch wife should be able to do." Ethan crossed the room and leaned against the counter beside her. "You want to know what I need from a wife?" "What?" "Someone who shows up, someone who tries, someone who doesn't give up when things get hard." He looked at her. "You're doing all of that." "But, no buts. You think Sarah Hutchins could have survived what you did? Could have crawled through the desert? Could have stood up and told her to go to hell? That's different. It's not. You're stronger than she'll ever be. And if she can't see that, that's her problem." Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Thank you." "For what?" "For defending me. For not believing her." "I'll never believe her, or anyone else who says you don't belong here." "Even when I burn the eggs?" "Even then." She smiled, and this time it was real. The days began to find their shape. Lena would wake early, help Clara with breakfast and morning chores. While Ethan worked the ranch, Lena would teach Clara reading, writing, arithmetic, history. Things the girl would need if she was ever going to make something of herself beyond this hard land.
Clara was a quick study, hungry for knowledge in a way that reminded Lena of herself at that age. But she was also stubborn, prone to arguing when she didn't understand something. "I don't see why I need to know this," Clara said one afternoon, glaring at a page of long division. "When am I ever going to use it? Every time you need to split supplies, calculate costs, figure out how much feed you need for the cattle." "Pa does that." "And what happens if something happens to your pa?" Clara's face went pale. "Don't say that." Lena softened. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to prepare you. The world's not kind to women who can't take care of themselves." "Is that why you learned all this stuff, so you could take care of yourself?" "Yes." "Did it work?" Lena thought about Boston, about Charles Whitlock and the school and the desperate flight west, about waking up in the desert with broken legs and no hope. "Not always," she admitted, "but it helped, and it's better than the alternative." Clara considered this, then went back to her work without complaint. That night, Ethan asked how the lessons were going. "She's smart," Lena said. "Smarter than she gives herself credit for." "She gets that from her mother." "Tell me about her." "Sarah." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. They were sitting on the porch again. It had become their routine, these evening conversations after Clara was asleep. "She was a teacher too," he said finally. "That's how we met. She came west with her family, took a position at the school in Rawlins. I was working a ranch nearby." He paused. "She was nothing like me. She loved books, music, all the things I'd never had time for, but she saw something in me anyway. She loved you." "Eventually, it wasn't instant. She was practical about it, said she needed security, and I could provide that. I needed someone to help build a life with, and she was willing." He smiled faintly. "We made it work, and somewhere along the way it became real." "Do you miss her?" "Every day, but not the way I did at first. Now it's just, she should be here. She should be watching Clara grow up. Should be teaching her the things I can't." He looked at Lena. "I'm glad you're here, but I wish she was too." "I'm not trying to replace her." "I know, and I'm not asking you to. I just wanted you to know that sometimes when I'm quiet, it's not because of you. It's because I'm thinking about her." "That's fair." "Is it?" "Yes. She was part of your life, part of Clara's life. Pretending she didn't exist would be worse." Ethan nodded slowly. "Thank you for understanding. I'm trying. That's all anyone can do." 3 weeks into Lena's time at the ranch, a storm rolled in from the north. The sky turned green-black and the wind picked up until it was howling across the prairie like something alive. Ethan was out with the cattle when it hit. Lena saw him riding hard toward the barn, trying to get the animals secured before the worst of it arrived. "Clara," Lena called, "help me get the shutters closed." They worked together, moving through the house room by room. Clara was calm, efficient. She'd done this before, but Lena could see the worry in her eyes every time she glanced toward the window. "He'll be fine," Lena said. "How do you know?" "Because he's survived this long. He knows what he's doing." The storm hit like a fist. Rain hammered the roof, and the wind screamed through every crack in the walls. Lena lit a lamp and pulled Clara close, both of them sitting at the kitchen table and waiting. 20 minutes later, the door burst open. Ethan stumbled in, soaked through, his face grim. "Lost 3 head," he said, "spooked and ran. I'll have to track them tomorrow." "Are you hurt?" Lena asked. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." He looked down at his arm where his shirt was torn and blood was seeping through. "It's just a scratch." "Sit down." "Lena, sit down." He sat. Lena got water and clean cloth and started cleaning the wound. It was deeper than he'd said. A long gash across his forearm, probably from a loose piece of wood or metal in the barn. "This needs stitches," she said. "I'll be fine." "You'll get infected." "I've had worse." "That's not the point." She threaded a needle with steady hands. "Clara, get me the whiskey." Clara ran to get it. Ethan watched Lena work, something unreadable in his expression. "You've done this before," he said. "My father cut himself once, deep. The doctor was too expensive, so I learned to do it myself. How old were you? 12. Jesus. Hold still. She stitched the wound closed with careful, practiced movements. Ethan didn't flinch, but she could see his jaw tighten with each pull of the thread. When she was done, she wrapped it in clean cloth and sat back.
Thank you, Ethan said quietly. You're welcome. Clara was watching them both, something like relief on her face. You're a good team. Neither of them answered, but Lena thought maybe Clara was right. The next morning, Ethan went out to track the lost cattle. He was gone most of the day, and when he came back, he only had 2 of them. The third one's dead, he said flatly. Found it in a ravine, broke its neck in the fall. Lena saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched too tight. I'm sorry. Can't afford to lose stock. Not now. What does that mean? He hesitated, then sighed. Means we're tighter on money than I'd like. The ranch isn't bringing in what it should. I've been selling off cattle just to keep things running. Why didn't you tell me? Because it's my problem, not yours. We're supposed to be partners, aren't we? Or was that just talk? Ethan looked at her. We are, but I don't want you worrying about things you can't control. I grew up managing a household on nothing. I can help. How? Let me see the books. Let me figure out where we can cut costs. Let me be useful in a way that matters. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, I'll show you tonight. That evening, after Clara was asleep, Ethan spread the ledger on the kitchen table. Lena studied it by lamplight, her finger tracing down the columns of numbers. It was worse than she'd thought. The ranch was barely breaking even, and that was before accounting for the lost cattle, the repairs that needed doing, the winter supplies they'd need to buy. You're in trouble, she said. I know. How long have you been holding this together? Since Sarah died. Before that we were doing okay, but after I couldn't keep up with everything. Things started slipping. Lena tapped the page. This feed bill, you're paying too much. Only supplier in range. There's another one in Rollins. It's farther, but the price is better. If we bought in bulk, we'd save enough to make the trip worth it. Ethan leaned over, looking at what she was pointing to. You're right. I never thought about it. And here, you're selling cattle at market rate, but if you sold directly to the butcher in Miller's Crossing, you'd cut out the middleman. The butcher doesn't need that many head. Not at once. But if you worked out a contract, steady supply over time, he might take it. They worked through the night, finding small savings here and there. It wasn't enough to fix everything, but it was a start. When they finally stopped, Ethan looked at her with something like wonder. You're good at this, he said. I told you. I'm not useless. I never thought you were. Didn't you? He shook his head. No, I was just afraid to rely on you, afraid you'd leave and take all this with you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm starting to believe that. They sat in the quiet kitchen, the lamp burning low between them. Outside the night was vast and dark, but in here it felt small, safe. We're going to make this work, Lena said. The ranch? All of it. The ranch. This family. Us. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her like that, intentional, deliberate. Yeah, he said. We are. The next Sunday, Lena insisted they go to town for church. Not because she was particularly religious, she wasn't, but because she knew people were talking, and the only way to stop them was to show up and prove she wasn't hiding. Ethan didn't want to go. It's just going to be more of what Sarah Hutchins said. Probably, but I'm not going to let her win. You don't have to prove anything to those people. Maybe not, but I have to prove it to myself. So they went. All three of them, dressed in their best clothes, walking into the small church at the edge of Miller's Crossing with their heads high. The whispers started immediately. Lena could feel eyes on her, tracking her limp, the way she leaned on her cane. Sarah Hutchins was sitting in the front row, her expression smug. They found a pew toward the back. Clara sat between them, her small hand reaching for Lena's. The service was long and dull, the preacher droning on about duty and perseverance. Lena barely listened. She was too focused on sitting still, on not showing weakness, on being exactly what they didn't expect. Afterward, they lingered outside while people filed past.
Most of them nodded politely, but didn't stop to talk. A few were openly hostile, their glances cold and dismissive. Then Mary Miller appeared, her face warm and open. "Lena, it's so good to see you up and about. You look wonderful." "Thank you, Mary. Truly. I know the last few months have been hard, but you're doing remarkable." Sarah Hutchins was standing nearby, listening. Mary's voice got a little louder. "And I heard you've been helping with the ranch finances. Thomas says Ethan mentioned you found some ways to cut costs. That's impressive." "I'm just doing what I can." "Well, it's more than most. We could use someone with your head for numbers on the town council. We're always struggling to balance the budget." Lena blinked. "You want me on the town council?" "If you're interested, we meet once a month. It's mostly dull administrative work, but it's important." I'll think about it." "Please do." Mary squeezed her arm. "We need more women with sense around here. Too many of us just sit back and let the men make all the decisions." She said it while looking directly at Sarah Hutchins, who turned red and stalked off. On the ride home, Clara was practically bouncing in her seat. "Did you see Mrs. Hutchins' face? She looked like she swallowed a lemon." "Clara," Ethan said, but he was smiling. "What? She did?" Lena laughed. It felt good, that laugh, like something unlocking in her chest. "Mary meant what she said," Ethan told her. "About the council. You should do it." "I don't know. It might be too much." "You're already doing too much. What's one more thing?" "He's right," Clara said, "and it would make Mrs. Hutchins mad. That's worth it by itself. That's not a good reason to join the town council." "It's not a bad one either." Lena shook her head, but she was still smiling. "I'll think about it." She did think about it. For 3 days, while she worked through the ranch accounts and taught Clara and helped Ethan plan the winter preparations. And in the end, she decided to say yes. Not because it would spite Sarah Hutchins, though that was a pleasant side effect, but because it was a way to be part of something bigger than the ranch. A way to prove she belonged here, not just to Ethan and Clara, but to herself. When she told Mary at the next town council meeting, the older woman beamed. "I knew you'd come around. Welcome aboard." The work was tedious, budgets and supply orders and endless debates about road maintenance, but Lena found she liked it, liked having her opinion matter, liked being useful in a way that had nothing to do with her legs or her past. And slowly, grudgingly, the town began to accept her. Not everyone. Sarah Hutchins still watched her with cold eyes, still whispered behind her hand when Lena walked past. But others started to nod in greeting, started to ask her opinion on things, started to treat her like she belonged. It was more than Lena had hoped for, and it was enough. One night, nearly 2 months after she'd arrived at the ranch, Lena woke to the sound of crying. She lay still for a moment, listening. It was coming from Clara's room. She got up carefully, using her cane to navigate the dark hallway. Clara's door was half open. Inside, the girl was curled up in bed, her face buried in her pillow. "Clara?" Lena stepped inside. "What's wrong?" Clara looked up, her face wet with tears. "I miss her." "Miss who?" "Ma. I miss Ma." Lena's heart clenched. She sat down on the edge of the bed. "I know. It's not fair. She should be here. Not you." The words stung, but Lena understood them. "You're right. She should be." Clara blinked, surprised. "What?" "Your mother should be here. She should be tucking you in, teaching you things, watching you grow up. It's not fair that she's gone. And I'm sorry. But you're here instead." "I am, and I know that's not what you wanted." "I didn't mean—" Clara's voice broke. "I don't want you to leave." "I'm not going to leave. Promise?" "I promise." Clara threw her arms around Lena's neck, sobbing. Lena held her, stroking her hair, letting her cry until there were no more tears left. "I'm scared," Clara whispered. "Of what?" "That you'll die too. Like Ma did. And then it'll just be me and Pa again, and I don't think I can do that." "Hey." Lena pulled back, looking Clara in the eye. "Listen to me. I'm not going anywhere. I'm healthy. I'm getting stronger every day. And I'm not leaving you. Do you understand?" Clara nodded, sniffling. "Good. Now try to sleep. And if you get scared again, you come wake me up. Anytime. Okay?" Okay. Lena tucked her in, smoothing the blanket. At the door, she paused. Clara? Yeah? I miss my mother too, every day, so I understand. What happened to her? She died when I was young. I don't remember her very well, but I remember wishing she was still here. Does it get easier? Yes, not right away. But yes.
How long? I don't know. Everyone's different. Clara was quiet for a moment, then, do you think Ma would like you? Lena smiled. I hope so. I think she would. Thank you, Clara. Now sleep. She closed the door softly and made her way back to her room. But she didn't sleep. She stood at the window looking out at the dark land, thinking about mothers and daughters and the families we choose. And for the first time since leaving Boston, she felt like maybe she'd chosen right.
The morning started like any other. Lena was in the kitchen, working through a batch of bread dough while Clara practiced her penmanship at the table. Ethan had ridden out early to check the fence line on the eastern pasture, promising to be back by noon. It was almost 10 when they heard the horse. Not Ethan's. The rhythm was wrong, faster and less steady. Lena wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the window. A rider was coming up the road, pushing his mount hard. As he got closer, she recognized Thomas Miller's youngest son, barely 16 and looking scared. Claire saw it too. Something's wrong. The boy pulled up hard in the yard, his horse lathered and breathing heavy. Mrs. Cade, he called out. Lena stepped onto the porch. She still wasn't used to being called that. They hadn't actually married yet, the ceremony planned for next month. But she didn't correct him. What is it? There's a man in town. Says he's looking for you. Got in on the morning stage. Lena's blood went cold. What man? Didn't give a name, but he's asking questions. About you, about Mr. Cade, about where you're staying. The boy hesitated. Pa thought you should know. Said the man seems determined. Claire had come to stand beside Lena. Who would be looking for you? Lena's mind was racing. There was only one person who would come all this way. Only one person who would bother. Charles Whitlock, she said quietly. Who's that? Someone from my past. Lena looked at the boy. Thank your father for the warning. Tell him I'll handle it. The boy nodded and rode off. Lena stood on the porch, her hands gripping the railing hard enough to hurt. Lena? Clara's voice was small. Who is Charles Whitlock? The man I told you about. The one who tried to force me to marry him. But you said no. I did. And then I left Boston to get away from him. So why is he here? That was the question, wasn't it? Charles was wealthy, powerful, used to getting what he wanted. But surely even he wouldn't travel halfway across the country for a woman who'd rejected him, unless his pride was wounded badly enough, unless he thought he still had some claim on her. I don't know, Lena said, but I need to go to town. Should we wait for Pa? No. This is my problem. I'll deal with it. But, Clara, listen to me. When your father gets back, tell him where I went. Tell him... She paused. What could she tell him? That she was going to face down a man who'd tried to control her entire life? That she might not win? Tell him I'll be back soon. Clara looked unconvinced, but she nodded. Lena saddled one of the horses, a gentle mare named Daisy that didn't mind her awkward mounting, and rode toward town. Her left leg was aching by the time she was halfway there, the old injury protesting the unfamiliar position. But she ignored it. She'd survived worse than a little pain. Miller's Crossing was busy when she arrived, the usual mix of ranchers and townspeople going about their business. Lena tied Daisy outside the general store and made her way down the main street, looking for an unfamiliar face. She found him outside the hotel. Charles Whitlock looked exactly as she remembered, tall, well-dressed, with the kind of polished appearance that marked him as someone from back east. His suit was tailored, his boots expensive, his hair perfectly combed. He stood out in this rough town like a peacock in a henhouse. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. His face broke into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lena, there you are. She stopped a few feet away, her cane planted firmly. Charles, what are you doing here? Looking for you, of course. When you disappeared so suddenly, I was worried. I wasn't aware my whereabouts were your concern. Of course they are. We had an understanding. No, you had expectations, I had other plans.
His smile tightened. Might we speak somewhere private? We can speak right here. A few people had stopped to watch. Lena could see Mary Miller standing in the doorway of the boarding house, her face concerned. Sarah Hutchins was there too, looking delighted by the drama. Charles glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with the audience. Very well. I came to bring you home. I am home. Boston is your home. This, he gestured dismissively at the town around them. This is a mistake. It's my mistake to make. Is it? Because from what I hear, you're living with a rancher and his daughter, pretending to be something you're not. His voice hardened. You're embarrassing yourself, Lena, and embarrassing me. How exactly am I embarrassing you? I'm 3,000 miles away. You're mine. Everyone knows that. Your father promised. My father is dead, and I was never yours. Charles took a step closer. Lena held her ground, though her heart was hammering. You think this frontier farmer can give you what I can? Security, status, a real life? He gives me choice. That's more than you ever offered. Choice. Charles laughed, but it was bitter. You think you have choices out here? Look at yourself. You can barely walk. You're living in poverty, teaching a child who'll never amount to anything, pretending you belong in a world that will never accept you. I've been accepted more here in 3 months than I ever was in Boston. By who? These people? He waved at the growing crowd. They're staring at you like you're a spectacle. They pity you. Maybe some do, but they don't own me. You don't own me. Charles's expression darkened. I came all this way to give you a chance to fix this quietly, to come back with dignity. But if you refuse, I'll make this difficult. How? I can make life very hard for your rancher. I have connections, money. I can destroy his credit, ruin his reputation, make sure he never sells another head of cattle. Lena felt ice in her veins. You wouldn't. Try me. All you have to do is come back to Boston. Marry me like you should have from the start, and I'll leave him alone. That's extortion. That's reality. You made your choice, Lena. You chose to run, and running has consequences. Before Lena could respond, a voice cut through the tension. I think you should leave. Ethan was standing at the edge of the crowd, his horse still behind him. He must have come into town for supplies and heard the commotion. His face was calm, but his eyes were dangerous. Charles turned to him with barely concealed contempt. And you must be the rancher. How quaint. I'm Ethan Cade, and you're threatening my family. Your family? She's not your wife, not yet. And if I have my way, she never will be. That's not your decision to make. Actually, it is. Lena's father owed me money, a great deal of money. Before he died, we had an agreement, his daughter's hand in marriage in exchange for forgiving the debt. Charles pulled a folded paper from his coat. I have it in writing. Lena's stomach dropped. That's not possible. Your father was desperate. He signed whatever I put in front of him. Let me see that, Ethan said. Charles handed it over with a smug expression. Ethan read it slowly, his jaw tightening with each line. This is a contract, he said finally. Exactly. A legal binding contract. Lena is obligated to marry me. Not in this territory, she's not. Ethan handed the paper back. Wyoming doesn't recognize contracts made under duress. And even if it did, Lena's an adult. She can make her own choices. Perhaps, but I can still make your life miserable. You can try. The two men stared at each other. The crowd had gone silent, everyone watching to see what would happen next. Then Lena stepped forward, placing herself between them. Charles, listen to me. I understand you came a long way. I understand you feel like I owe you something, but I don't. My father's debts died with him, and whatever agreement you think you had, it's over. Lena, I'm not finished. I left Boston because staying there meant losing myself, becoming someone I wasn't, someone who existed only to make you look good. She took a breath. Out here, I'm nobody special. I limp, I struggle, I burn dinner half the time. But I'm free, and I'm choosing this life. I'm choosing Ethan. I'm choosing Clara. I'm choosing myself. You're choosing poverty and hardship. Maybe, but they're my poverty and hardship, not yours. Charles's face was red now, his composure cracking. You're being foolish, and probably. But I'd rather be a fool on my own terms than someone else's perfect wife. You'll regret this. I already regret a lot of things, but this won't be one of them. For a long moment, Charles just stared at her. Then he turned to Ethan. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll make sure every bank, every supplier, every business within 100 miles knows that Ethan Cade is a man who steals other men's property. I'm not property, Lena said quietly. In the eyes of the law, you might as well be. Not here, Ethan said. Not in Wyoming. We don't play by Boston rules. Charles sneered. We'll see about that. He turned and strode toward the hotel. The crowd parted to let him pass, and then slowly dispersed, people returning to their business with plenty to gossip about. Lena stood in the street, shaking. Ethan moved to her side, his hand finding hers. You all right? He asked quietly. I don't know. He has that contract. He could still cause trouble. Let him try. We'll deal with it. Ethan, he's serious. He has money, connections, and we have the law on our side and the truth. He squeezed her hand. You told him no. That's what matters. But what if he makes good on his threats? What if he ruins the ranch? Then we'll start over. We've done harder things. Lena looked up at him. You're not worried? I'm furious, but worried. No, he's just a bully who's not used to being told no. Ethan smiled faintly. He picked the wrong woman to push around. Mary Miller had come over, her face concerned. Lena, are you all right? That man seemed awful. I'm fine, Mary, thank you. If you need anything, a place to stay, someone to talk to, you let me know. I will. They rode back to the ranch together, Ethan keeping pace with Lena's slower mare. Clara was waiting on the porch, her face tight with worry. What happened? She asked as soon as they were close enough. I told him to leave, Lena said, and I told him I'm staying here. Is he going to? I don't know. But she did know. Men like Charles Whitlock didn't give up easily. They pushed until they got what they wanted, or until the cost of pushing became too high. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind churning through possibilities. Charles could make trouble, real trouble. He could poison the well with suppliers, spread rumors, make it impossible for Ethan to do business. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went downstairs. Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, a lamp burning low beside him. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. He shook his head. Keep thinking about what he said, about that contract. It's not valid. You said so yourself. I said it's not valid in Wyoming, but that doesn't mean he can't use it to cause problems. Ethan looked at her. I need you to tell me the truth. Did your father really owe him money? Lena sat down across from him. Yes. A lot of it. The shipping business was failing, and Charles offered to invest, but the terms, she trailed off. My father was desperate. He would have agreed to anything, including promising you in marriage. I didn't know about it. Not until after he died, when Charles showed me the papers. That's when I realized I had to leave. And you think he'll use those papers now? I think he'll try. But Ethan, you need to understand something. I knew this might happen. I knew there was a chance he'd come after me. And I came anyway. Why? Because the alternative was worse. Because staying in Boston meant giving up everything I was. Because... She stopped, searching for the right words. Because, for the first time in my life, I wanted something for myself. Not what someone else wanted for me. Something I chose. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. I'm glad you chose this, he said. Even with all the trouble it's causing? Especially with all the trouble. Means you really wanted it. She smiled despite herself. You're a strange man, Ethan Cade. You've said that before. It's still true. They sat in the quiet kitchen, hands clasped across the table, drawing strength from each other. The next morning, Charles Whitlock made his move. Ethan had gone to Miller's Crossing to pick up supplies. He came back 3 hours later, his face grim. Jennings won't extend our credit, he said without preamble. Lena looked up from where she was helping Clara with her reading. What? The general store. Jennings says he can't afford to give us credit anymore, says there's been talk about our reliability. What kind of talk? The kind that comes from a man with money throwing it around.
Ethan tossed his hat on the table. Whitlock's been busy. He's also been to the bank, to the feed supplier, to every business I deal with, spreading poison. What did he tell them? That I'm harboring stolen property, that you're contractually obligated to marry him and I'm interfering, that anyone who does business with me is complicit in theft. That's insane. Maybe. But it's working. Half the town's too afraid to cross him. Clara had gone pale. What does that mean? Means we're going to have a harder time getting supplies, harder time selling cattle, harder time keeping this place running. Ethan met Lena's eyes. He's trying to squeeze us out. Then we fight back. How? We don't have his resources. We have something better. We have the truth. And we have this community. Lena stood. Mary Miller said people here have been accepting me. Let's see if that's true. What are you planning? I'm planning to go to that town council meeting tonight and tell everyone exactly what's happening. No hiding, no shame, just the truth. Ethan looked skeptical. You think that'll work? I think it's our only option. That evening, Lena walked into the town hall with her head high. The monthly council meeting was already in session, Mary Miller presiding over a discussion about road repairs. When Lena entered, the room went quiet. I'm sorry to interrupt, Lena said, but I need to say something, and I need everyone to hear it. Mary gestured to the front of the room. Go ahead. Lena walked to the front, acutely aware of every eye on her. Sarah Hutchins was there, watching with barely concealed satisfaction, but others looked concerned, curious, willing to listen. Most of you know me, Lena began, or at least you know of me. The mail-order bride who nearly died in the desert, the crippled woman who can barely walk. She paused. But there's more to the story, and you deserve to know it. She told them everything. About Boston, about her father's debts, about Charles Whitlock and his contract. About fleeing west to escape a marriage she never agreed to. About building a life here, finding a family, choosing freedom over security. Now Charles has followed me here, she continued, and he's trying to force me back by destroying the life I've built. He's threatening Ethan's business. He's spreading lies. He's using his money and influence to make you all afraid. So what do you want from us? Someone called out. I want you to make your own choice, not based on fear, not based on what some rich man from Boston tells you, but based on what you know to be true. She looked around the room. I've been here 3 months. In that time, I've tried to be useful. I've joined this council. I've helped where I could. I've been honest with you, so I'm asking, do you believe I'm stolen property? Or do you believe I'm a woman who made her own choice? The room was silent. Then Mary Miller stood. I believe you chose, she said clearly, and I believe that choice should be respected. One by one, others stood. Thomas Miller, Henderson the doctor. Even a few of the ranchers who'd been skeptical of her at first. Not everyone. Sarah Hutchins remained seated, her face sour. A handful of others stayed down too, but most of the room was standing. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Mary said. This Whitlock man won't give up easy. We need to be smart about this. They spent the next hour strategizing. The council voted to draft a formal statement supporting Lena's right to self-determination. They agreed to collectively refuse Whitlock's attempts to interfere with local business. They even talked about bringing in a territorial judge if necessary. By the time the meeting ended, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. When she got back to the ranch, Ethan and Clara were waiting on the porch. How did it go? Ethan asked. Better than I expected. The council's backing us. Really? Really. Mary Miller stood up for me, and most of the others followed. Clara threw her arms around Lena's waist. I knew they would. Did you? Yeah, because you're brave, and people listen to brave people. Lena looked at Ethan over Clara's head. He was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since Charles had arrived. We might actually win this, he said. We might. And if we don't? Then we lose together, but at least we tried. The next day, Charles Whitlock showed up at the ranch. He rode up alone, which was either brave or stupid. Ethan met him in the yard, Lena standing beside him. Clara watched from the window. I heard about your little performance last night, Charles said without preamble. Very touching. It wasn't a performance, Lena replied. It was the truth. The truth is you're in breach of contract, and nothing your frontier friends say will change that. Maybe not in Boston, but we're not in Boston. Charles's expression hardened. I came to make you one final offer. Come back with me willingly, and I'll forget all of this. I'll leave your rancher alone. I'll even forgive your father's debts posthumously. But if you refuse, he let the threat hang. If I refuse, then I take this to court, federal court, if necessary. And I make sure everyone knows Ethan Cade is a thief who stole another man's fiancée.
She was never your fiancée, Ethan said quietly.
The contract says otherwise. The contract was signed under duress. Any judge worth his salt will throw it out. Perhaps. But the trial alone will destroy you, the legal fees, the publicity. By the time it's over, you'll have nothing left. Lena felt something shift inside her. All the fear, all the doubt. It crystallized into something hard and cold. No, she said. Charles blinked. What? No, I'm not going with you. I don't care about your contract. I don't care about your threats. I don't care if you take this to the highest court in the land. My answer is no. You're making a mistake. I've made lots of mistakes. This isn't one of them. Charles looked at Ethan. You're really going to let her throw your life away for this? It's not my choice to make, Ethan said. It's hers, and I support it. You're both fools, probably, but we're fools together. Charles stared at them for a long moment. Then he turned his horse and rode away without another word. Lena watched him go, her heart still racing. You think he'll really take us to court? She asked. I don't know, Ethan admitted, but if he does, we'll fight it. That could take years. Then it takes years. She looked at him. Why are you doing this? You could tell me to leave. Make this all go away. I could, but I won't. He took her hand. You chose to be here. I'm choosing to keep you here. That's what people do when they care about each other. Is that what we're doing? Caring about each other? Yeah, I think it is. Claire came running out of the house, her face bright with relief. Is he gone? He's gone, Lena confirmed. For good? I don't know, but for now. Clara looked between them. Are you scared? Lena considered lying, but Clara deserved the truth. Yes, she said. I'm terrified. But you're staying anyway? I'm staying anyway. Clara nodded, satisfied. Then she did something unexpected. She took both their hands and held them together. We're a family now, she said simply, and families stick together. Lena felt tears spill over. She looked at Ethan, who was looking back at her with something warm and fierce in his eyes. Yeah, he said softly. We are. And standing there in the yard, the three of them holding hands in the late afternoon sun, Lena thought maybe Clara was right. Maybe they were going to be okay. Charles Whitlock stayed in Miller's Crossing for another week. He made a show of it, taking meals at the hotel, walking the streets like he owned them, making sure everyone saw him, making sure everyone knew he wasn't backing down. But he was quieter now. No more public confrontations. No more threats delivered in front of crowds. Whatever strategy he was working on, he was keeping it to himself. Lena tried not to think about it. She had work to do, lessons with Clara, ranch accounts to balance, council meetings to attend. But the waiting wore on her. Every morning she'd wake up wondering if today would be the day Charles made his next move. Every evening she'd go to bed relieved that nothing had happened, but knowing it couldn't last. The tension was affecting everyone. Clara became quieter, more watchful. She'd stopped asking questions about when Charles would leave and started watching the road instead, as if expecting him to appear at any moment. Ethan worked longer hours, pushing himself until he came home exhausted, his way of dealing with things he couldn't control. On the fifth night, Lena found him in the barn long after dark, repairing a saddle that didn't need repairing. You're avoiding me, she said. He didn't look up. I'm working. The saddle's fine. You're hiding. I'm not hiding. Then what are you doing? He set down his tools and finally met her eyes. I'm trying to figure out how to protect you. And I can't. I can't fight a man with unlimited money and legal contracts and connections that go all the way to Washington. I can't stop him from ruining us if that's what he decides to do. And I hate it. I don't need you to protect me. Don't you? Because from where I'm standing, I brought you into this. I asked you to come west, to marry me, to build a life here, and now you're being threatened because of it. I chose this. You didn't force me. But if I'd never written that letter, then I'd still be in Boston, trapped in a life I hated, married to a man who saw me as property. She moved closer. What's happening now isn't your fault. It's his and mine for running instead of fighting, but it's not yours. It feels like mine. I know. But you can't carry everything, Ethan. Sometimes you have to trust that I'm strong enough to carry my own weight. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm scared of losing you, of losing everything we've built. Me too. But we face it together or not at all. He pulled her close and they stood in the dim barn, drawing strength from each other's presence. Outside, the night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like scattered seed. It should have been peaceful, but peace felt impossible with Charles Whitlock still in town, still plotting, still waiting. On the 8th day, a man arrived from Cheyenne. He was a lawyer, expensive-looking and official, carrying a leather case full of papers. He went straight to the hotel and stayed there for 3 hours, meeting with Charles behind closed doors. Lena watched from the general store window while pretending to shop. Mary Miller stood beside her, both of them trying to look casual while their hearts raced. You think he's filing suit? Mary asked quietly. Probably. Or drawing up some new contract to trap me with. He can't do that. The whole town would testify against him. The whole town testified for me at the council meeting. That didn't stop him from staying. Mary squeezed her arm. We won't let him take you, I promise. But promises felt fragile against the kind of power Charles wielded. Money could buy silence. Influence could bend laws. And Lena had learned long ago that justice wasn't guaranteed, especially not for women who dared to choose their own path. The lawyer left on the afternoon stage, and Charles followed him the next morning. Just like that, he was gone. Lena didn't trust it. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for papers to be served or threats to be delivered. But days passed, then a week, and nothing happened. Maybe he gave up, Claire suggested one evening over dinner. Men like that don't give up, Lena said, pushing food around her plate without eating. They just change tactics. Ethan was less worried. He saw the town wasn't going to turn on us, saw that whatever power he had back east doesn't mean much out here. Maybe he decided it wasn't worth the fight. Or maybe he's planning something worse, something we can't see coming. Lena. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. You can't live your life waiting for the next disaster. We've got too much else to do. He was right, of course. The ranch needed attention. Winter was coming early according to the old-timers, and they still had fences to repair, hay to put up, supplies to stockpile. Worrying about Charles was a luxury they couldn't afford. So Lena tried to focus on the present, on the life she was building, on the people who mattered. But at night, when the house was quiet and Ethan was asleep beside her, she'd lie awake and imagine all the ways Charles could still destroy them. Legal battles that would drain their savings, rumors that would poison their reputation, pressure on suppliers and buyers until the ranch became unsustainable. He had so many weapons at his disposal, and she had so few defenses. The nightmares came back. Not every night, but often enough. She'd wake up gasping, back in the desert with broken legs, but this time no one came. This time she just lay there while the sun burned her and the sand filled her mouth, and Charles stood in the distance, watching her die with that cold smile on his face. Ethan would wake when she did, would hold her until the shaking stopped, would whisper that it was over, she was safe, he had her. But safe felt like another lie people told themselves to get through the night. 2 weeks after Charles left, Thomas Miller rode out to the ranch with a telegram in his hand, and an expression Lena couldn't read. Her stomach dropped the moment she saw him. This came for you, he said, dismounting and handing it to Lena. From Cheyenne. Lena's hand shook so badly she could barely unfold it. The message was brief. Contract deemed invalid. Stop, Whitlock withdrew. Claim, stop, you are free. Stop. She read it 3 times before the words made sense. Then she read it again to be sure they hadn't rearranged themselves into something terrible. What does it say? Ethan asked, moving to her side. Charles withdrew his claim. The contract is invalid. Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from somewhere else. I'm free. Clara, who'd been feeding the chickens, dropped the bucket and ran over. He's really gone? For good? It says he withdrew the claim. But why?
Ethan took the telegram and read it himself, as if he needed to verify the words. Why would he just give up? Thomas cleared his throat. There's more. The lawyer who came through last week, turns out he wasn't working for Whitlock. He was investigating him. Word got to Cheyenne about what was happening here, and a judge got interested, started looking into Whitlock's business dealings. He paused. Turns out he's been using that same contract trick with other families, finding desperate men, loaning them money, then using their daughters as collateral when they couldn't pay. Forcing marriages, taking property. He's done it at least a dozen times. Lena felt sick. A dozen? That they know of. Could be more. The judge started building a case, and when Whitlock realized he was being investigated, he dropped all the outstanding claims, trying to save himself. But it's not looking good for him. He's facing fraud charges, extortion, maybe more. Good, Ethan said flatly. I hope they hang him. They won't hang him. He's too rich, too connected. But he might see jail time. And even if he doesn't, his reputation's destroyed. No one's going to do business with a man who treats women like property he can trade. Lena sat down hard on the porch steps. Her legs felt weak, her head swimming. Free. She was free. After months of waiting, months of fear, it was just over. You all right? Thomas asked, concerned. I don't know. I think so. She laughed, but it came out shaky. I spent so long being afraid of him, and now he's gone and I don't know what to do with that. You celebrate, Mary Miller said, riding up on her own horse. She must have followed Thomas out. You celebrate, and you live your life, and you don't waste another moment thinking about that miserable excuse for a man. Clara sat down beside Lena and took her hand. Does this mean we can really be a family now, without worrying? Yes, I think it does. Good. Clara leaned against her shoulder. I was getting tired of being worried. After Thomas and Mary left, the three of them sat on the porch in stunned silence. The afternoon sun was warm, the sky impossibly blue. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. Everything looked exactly the same as it had this morning, but somehow the world felt different, lighter. It's really over, Clara said wonderingly, breaking the silence. It's really over, Lena confirmed, and this time when she said it, she believed it. So what happens now? Lena looked at Ethan. He was watching her with an expression that was half hope, half fear, like he was afraid to believe it was real. Now we live, Lena said. We get married. We work the ranch. We build the life we've been planning. Just like that? Just like that. Clara grinned, her whole face lighting up. Can we have cake at the wedding, Mrs. Miller makes really good cake. We can have whatever cake you want. And can I wear Ma's good dress? The blue one? Lena felt tears prick her eyes. Sarah's dress. Clara wanted to honor her mother while celebrating this new beginning. It was perfect and heartbreaking at the same time. If you'd like to, Lena said softly. I'd like that. I think Ma would too. I think she'd be happy we're going to be a real family. Ethan's voice was rough when he spoke. Yeah, I think she would be too. They sat together as the sun moved across the sky, and slowly the reality of it sank in. No more looking over their shoulders. No more waiting for disaster. Just life, ordinary and difficult, and theirs to shape however they wanted. That evening, after Clara had gone to bed, Lena and Ethan took their usual walk out past the barn. But tonight felt different. The weight that had been pressing down on them for weeks was gone, and in its absence, everything seemed brighter, sharper, more real. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out it was a dream, Lena admitted. Me too. What if there's some catch, some legal loophole he's going to exploit? There's not. Thomas said the judge threw out the whole contract. It's done. But what if... Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her. Lena, it's over. You're free. We're free. And I know it's hard to believe because you've been fighting for so long you've forgotten what peace feels like. But this is it. This is what winning looks like. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let go of the fear that had become so familiar it felt like part of her. But trusting good news was harder than bracing for bad. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of being happy, of letting my guard down, of believing this is real and then having it ripped away. I know, but you can't live like that. You'll drive yourself crazy. I feel crazy.
I feel like I don't know how to exist without something to fight against. Ethan pulled her close, and she buried her face in his chest, breathing in the familiar smell of him, leather and hay and honest sweat. Then we'll figure it out together, he said. We'll teach you how to be happy, how to trust that good things can last, how to build instead of just survive.
What if I can't? Then we'll try anyway, and we'll fail and try again until we get it right.
That's what marriage is, isn't it? Trying together until you can't remember what it was like to try alone. She pulled back to look at him. When did you get so wise? Around the same time you taught me it was okay to hope again. They stood in the darkness, two people who'd been broken and were slowly learning how to be whole. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human suffering and human joy alike. But down here, in this small corner of Wyoming, two people were choosing each other. And that mattered more than all the indifferent stars combined. They planned the wedding for the first Saturday in November. It was a small affair, just the immediate community. Maybe 40 people gathered in the church at the edge of town. Mary Miller had indeed made cake, 3 layers of it with honey frosting and dried fruit between the layers. Someone had strung up paper decorations that looked handmade and earnest, and wildflowers from the prairie-filled mason jars on every surface. Lena wore a simple dress she'd made herself over the past month, cream-colored with lace at the collar that she'd traded eggs for at the general store. Her left leg still hurt, especially after long days, but she'd practiced walking without the cane, determined to make it down the aisle on her own strength. It was vanity, maybe, but it mattered to her. She'd crawled through the desert. She could walk to her own wedding. Clara wore Sarah's blue dress, carefully altered to fit her smaller frame by Mary Miller's expert hands. She carried wildflowers she'd picked that morning, prairie roses and black-eyed Susans and something purple whose name Lena didn't know. Her face was solemn with the importance of the occasion, but her eyes shone. And Ethan wore his best suit, the one he'd worn to his first wedding, though he'd had it cleaned and mended. When Lena had asked if that bothered him, wearing the same suit, he'd said no. Sarah was part of his story. Pretending otherwise would dishonor both her memory and what they were building now. The past and the present could coexist. Both could be true at once. The ceremony was short and simple. The preacher, a circuit rider who came through once a month, kept his remarks brief and practical. No flowery language about eternal love or perfect unions, just acknowledgement that marriage was work, that it required daily choice, that it was built from small moments more than grand gestures. When it came time for the vows, Ethan spoke first. His voice was steady, but Lena could see his hands trembling slightly. I promise to show up, he said, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I promise to choose you, to talk to you instead of disappearing into work, to be present even when being present is uncomfortable. And I promise to keep trying, even when I fail. Lena's throat was tight when it was her turn. She looked out at the assembled crowd. These people who'd been strangers 6 months ago and were now her community, and then back at Ethan. I promise to stay, she said, to build this life with you even when it's difficult. To be honest, even when the truth is messy. To fight with you instead of running away. And I promise to love you for who you are, not who I think you should be. Not perfectly, because I'm not capable of perfect, but truly, with everything I have. There were no rings. They couldn't afford them, and neither cared about the symbol when the substance was already there. Instead, they clasped hands, and the preacher pronounced them married in the eyes of the law and the community, and that was enough. The celebration afterward was loud and chaotic and perfect. People danced in the church hall to music from a fiddle that someone's cousin had brought, and the dancing was joyful and slightly off-key. Children ran between the adults' legs, and someone had brought whiskey that got passed around in tin cups, and the whole thing felt less like a formal event and more like a family gathering. Clara danced with everyone who asked, Ethan, Thomas Miller, even old Henderson the doctor, who moved stiffly but gamely tried to keep up. Her blue dress spun out around her and her face was flushed with happiness, and watching her, Lena felt something settle in her chest. This was what they'd fought for, this moment, this joy. Lena danced too, though her leg protested after the first few songs. Ethan held her carefully, supporting her weight when she needed it, and they moved slowly through the crowd while others spun past in a blur of color and laughter. Happy?
he asked, terrified.
That's not the same thing.
Isn't it? I'm married now. To you. To this life. There's no going back, no escape if it gets hard. Would you want to go back? She looked up at him. His face was open, vulnerable, asking a question that mattered. No, she said, not even a little. But that doesn't mean I'm not scared. Of what? Of failing you. Of not being enough. Of Clara growing up and resenting me for not being her real mother. Of the ranch failing and you regretting that you married a crippled woman who can't pull her weight. Of Lena. He stopped dancing, right there in the middle of the floor, and cupped her face in his hands. I don't need you to be perfect. I need you to be you. Stubborn and scared and brave enough to try anyway. That's what I fell in love with. Not some imaginary perfect woman. You. Even with the burned dinners? Especially with the burned dinners, they keep me humble. She laughed, and the fear receded a little. Not gone. It would probably never be completely gone, but manageable, bearable. I love you, she said. I love you too. They danced until Lena's leg couldn't take any more, and then they sat at one of the long tables and watched the others. Sarah Hutchins was there, standing in the corner with her arms crossed, but even she looked less hostile than usual. The fight had gone out of her when Charles left and Lena's place in the community became undeniable. She'd never be friendly, but at least she'd stopped actively undermining them. As the evening wore down and people started to drift home, Mary Miller pulled Lena aside into a quiet corner. I'm proud of you, she said, her voice warm. For what? For surviving, for fighting, for refusing to let that man break you, for building something real out of nothing. Mary squeezed her hand, and for showing the rest of us what courage looks like. I'm not courageous. I'm just stubborn. Sometimes that's the same thing, and sometimes stubbornness is exactly what the world needs from us. She paused. Sarah, my Sarah, not that sour-faced Hutchins woman. She would have liked you. You have the same spine. Lena's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. That means more than you know. She'd be glad Ethan found you, glad Clara has you, and she'd want you to know that loving them doesn't diminish what she had with them. There's room for both. I hope so. I know so. Love doesn't run out just because you share it with more people. It multiplies. Mary smiled. Now go be with your husband and your daughter. This is your day. Enjoy it. When they finally left, Ethan, Lena, and Clara, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and deep indigo. They rode home in the wagon, Clara asleep between them with her head on Lena's shoulder, and neither of the adults spoke. There was nothing that needed saying. The day had said it all. The ranch looked different when they arrived, not physically. It was the same rough buildings, the same hard land, the same endless sky, but it felt different. It felt like coming home after a long journey, even though Lena had been living here for months. Maybe it was the wedding. Maybe it was the absence of threat hanging over them. Or maybe it was just that she'd finally given herself permission to believe this was real. That night, after Clara had been carried to bed still in her blue dress because she refused to wake up enough to change, Ethan and Lena sat on the porch. It had become their ritual, these quiet evenings after the day's work was done, and tonight felt both the same and entirely different. Are you scared? Lena asked, voicing the question that had been circling in her mind all day. Yes. Of what? Failing. Losing you. Not being enough. The same things I've always been scared of. Marriage doesn't make fear disappear, it just gives you someone to be afraid with. That's not very romantic. No, but it's true. Lena leaned against him. I'm scared too. Of not being a good enough mother to Clara. Of my leg getting worse and becoming a burden. Of you waking up one day and realizing you could have done better. I couldn't have done better. I could have done different, but not better. How do you know? Because different doesn't mean better. It just means different, and I don't want different. I want you. They sat in the darkness, listening to the night sounds. Wind in the grass, cattle settling in the distance, the creak of the house adjusting to the cooling temperature. It was peaceful in a way that Lena was still learning to trust. Thank you, Ethan said quietly. For what? For not dying in the desert, for crawling when you could have given up,
For choosing this life even when it would have been easier to run, for giving Clara someone to love, for giving me someone to love, for being brave enough to be scared and do it anyway. Lena felt tears on her face. Thank you for coming to find me, for not turning back when you saw how broken I was, for setting my bones even though you didn't know how, for choosing me every day, for making me believe I could have this. We can have this. We do have this. I know, I'm starting to believe it. Good. Because I'm not letting you go. You're stuck with me now. I can think of worse fates. He kissed her then, soft and slow. And somewhere in the house, Clara stirred in her sleep, but didn't wake. Just made a small sound of contentment and settled deeper into her blankets. The months that followed were hard in ways Lena hadn't anticipated. Not because of external threats. Charles was gone, the contract was void, and they were as safe as anyone could be on the frontier. But because building a life together, really building it, required daily work that didn't come with clear victories or dramatic moments. Winter came fierce and early, just like the old-timers had predicted. Snow piled up against the barn, and the temperature dropped so low that water froze in the bucket between the well and the house. Ethan worked himself to exhaustion, keeping the cattle fed and the pipes from bursting. Lena worked just as hard, keeping the house warm and the food stores managed, and Clara educated despite the monotony of being trapped indoors. There were days when Lena's leg hurt so badly she could barely walk, when the cold made the old injury ache deep in the bone. Days when she snapped at Clara over nothing and had to apologize later. Days when Ethan was so exhausted he could barely speak, and the silence felt heavy instead of comfortable. But there were good days too. Days when the three of them would sit by the fire and read together, Clara curled between them while snow fell outside. Days when Clara would laugh so hard at something silly that both adults couldn't help but join in. Days when Ethan would look at Lena across the breakfast table and smile for no reason except that she was there. Clara was thriving under Lena's teaching. She'd progressed through her readers faster than Lena had expected, and by spring she was reading at a level well above her age. She showed a particular aptitude for mathematics, solving problems with a speed and accuracy that reminded Lena of herself at that age. More than that, Clara was opening up emotionally. She talked more, shared her feelings more, stopped trying to be the perfect stoic child who never complained. She had nightmares sometimes about losing Lena the way she'd lost her mother, and she'd come padding into their room in the dark and climb into bed between them without asking. Ethan always made room without complaint. One afternoon in late winter, Clara looked up from her arithmetic and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Lena said, setting down the shirt she was mending. "When are you going to have a baby?" Lena blinked, caught completely off guard. "What?" "A baby. You and Pa. When are you going to have one?" We haven't talked about that." "Why not? Don't married people have babies?" "Sometimes, but not always. And not right away, necessarily." Clara frowned. "I want a brother, or a sister, someone to play with." "I know you do, but these things don't always happen just because we want them to." "Are you too old?" "Clara!" "What, Mrs.?" "I'm not Mrs. I'm Clara." "Clara!" "What? Mrs.?" "I'm not Mrs. I'm Clara." "Clara!" "What? Mrs. I'm 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 not Mrs. I'm Clara." "Clara!" "What, Mrs. I'm not Mrs. I'm Clara." "Clara!" "What? Mrs. I'm not Mrs. I'm Clara." "Clara!" "What, 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 Mrs. I'm not Mrs. I'm Clara." "Clara!"
What, Mrs.? I'm not Mrs. I'm Clara. Clara. What? Mrs. 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 I'm not Mrs.
Miller said her cousin was too old to have babies after 40. Are you 40? I'm 32. Oh, then you're not too old. Thank you for that assessment, Lena said dryly. But having a baby is complicated. It's not just about whether we can. It's about whether we should, whether we're ready, whether it's the right choice. Clara considered this seriously. I think you should. I think Pa would be a good father to a baby, and you'd be a good mother. I'm trying to be a good mother to you. You are. That's why I think you'd be good with a baby too. That evening, after Clara had gone to bed, Lena mentioned the conversation to Ethan. They were doing the dishes together, falling into the rhythm they'd developed over the months. He washed, she dried. They worked in companionable silence most of the time. She asked me when we're having a baby, Lena said, trying to sound casual. Ethan's hands stilled in the wash water. Did she?
Said she wants a sibling. What did you tell her? That it's complicated, that these things don't happen just because we want them. Ethan resumed washing, his movements careful and deliberate. Is it something you want? I don't know. Is it something you want? I asked you first, and I'm asking you back. He set down the plate he was holding and dried his hands on a towel. I think about it sometimes, about what it would be like to have a child with you, to start fresh, without the grief hanging over everything. But I'm also scared. Of what? Of losing you the way I lost Sarah. Of something going wrong. Of not being able to protect you. He paused. And I'm scared that if we have a baby, Clara will feel replaced, like she's not enough. She wouldn't she? She lost her mother, found you, got attached. And then suddenly there's this new person taking your attention. How is she supposed to feel about that? Lena hadn't thought about it that way. We'd make sure she knew she was still important, still loved. Would we? Or would we get caught up in the new baby and let her drift? He shook his head. I don't want to make the same mistakes I made with Sarah. I don't want to let work or worry or anything else make me forget what matters. Then we'd be intentional about it. We'd make sure Clara felt included, loved, important. How? How do you guarantee that? You can't, but you can try. You can pay attention. You can check in. You can make sure she knows that love doesn't divide, it multiplies. Ethan smiled faintly. Mary Miller said something similar at the wedding. Mary Miller's a wise woman. So are you. They finished the dishes in silence, but it wasn't the comfortable silence they usually shared. This one had weight to it, questions that needed answering but weren't ready to be answered yet. Later, lying in bed while Ethan slept beside her, Lena put her hand on her stomach and wondered. She'd never thought much about children before coming west. Teaching other people's children had been enough. But now with Ethan and Clara and this life they'd built, the idea held a strange appeal. Not yet, though. They were still learning how to be a family of 3. Adding a 4th member felt premature. But someday, maybe. If the land allowed it. If their bodies cooperated. If the 100 things that had to go right all went right. Someday. Spring came slowly, grudgingly, as if winter didn't want to release its grip. But eventually the snow melted and the grass turned green and the cattle that had survived the harsh months grew fat on new growth. Lena's leg improved with the warmer weather. She'd never walk without a limp. The bones had healed crooked despite Ethan's best efforts, but she got stronger. By late April, she could make it to town and back without stopping to rest. By May, she was helping with some of the lighter ranch work.
her hands growing calloused and strong from mending fences and feeding livestock. Clara shot up 3 inches that spring, growing so fast her dresses had to be let out twice. She started asking questions about things that made both Ethan and Lena uncomfortable. Boys and bodies, and what happened between married people, and how babies were really made. Lena answered as honestly as she could, drawing on her own fragmented education and the whispered conversations she'd had with other girls when she was Clara's age. Ethan turned red and left the room for most of these discussions, but he supported Lena's approach of treating Clara like someone capable of understanding difficult truths. And Ethan kept his promise. He showed up. Every day. Even when he was tired, even when the work was overwhelming, even when the easier thing would have been to disappear into labor and avoid the complicated business of being present with his family. They fought sometimes. About money. There was never enough. No matter how carefully Lena managed the accounts. About Clara's education. Ethan thought Lena was pushing her too hard. Lena thought she wasn't pushing hard enough. About whether Lena was doing too much physical work and risking further injury to her leg. But they fought facing each other, not running away. And they always found their way back to each other afterward, usually with apologies and negotiations and small compromises that added up to something workable. One evening in late summer, nearly a year after Lena had first arrived broken in the desert, they stood together on the eastern pasture watching the sunset. Clara was back at this house supposedly practicing her penmanship, but probably reading instead, and they'd stolen this moment for themselves. "You ever regret it?" Ethan asked. "Coming here? Marrying me? Taking on this life?" Lena considered the question seriously. There were things she missed about her old life, hot baths and bookstores and not having every muscle ache at the end of the day. But regret? No. "No," she said. "Do you? Bringing me here? Taking on a wife with a bad leg and a difficult past?" "No," he said it without hesitation. "Not even when you burn dinner? Not even then. Though I wish you'd stop doing that." She laughed. "I'm getting better." "You are. Remember those eggs back in September? Those were actually edible." High praise. "I'm a generous man." They stood in silence, watching the light fade from gold to orange to deep purple. The land stretched out before them, harsh and beautiful and unforgiving, but theirs in a way that mattered more than legal ownership. They'd earned it through work and sweat, and the daily choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. "We did it," Lena said quietly. "Did what?" "Made this work, built something real, survived. We're still surviving, every day." "That's what I mean. We didn't give up. We kept choosing each other, kept choosing this life, even when it was hard." Ethan pulled her close, especially when it was hard. The easy choice doesn't mean anything. It's the hard ones that matter. Is that wisdom or stubbornness talking? Can it be both? I suppose it can. They stood together as the stars began to appear, and Lena thought about how far she'd come. A year ago, she'd been crawling through the desert with broken legs, refusing to die but not sure she wanted to live. And now here she was, standing upright, married, part of a family, part of a community, part of something bigger than herself. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It wasn't the life she'd dreamed of as a girl in Boston, teaching at her father's insistence and dreaming of escape. But it was hers. Completely, utterly hers. And that made all the difference. When they walked back to the house, Clara was indeed reading instead of practicing penmanship. She looked up guiltily when they entered, but Lena just smiled. "What are you reading?" "The same book as last week. I'm reading it again." "Why?" "Because I like it. And because I wanted to see if I understood it better the second time." "Do you?" "Some parts. Other parts are still confusing." "Which parts?" Clara showed her the page, and they talked through the difficult passage together while Ethan made tea. It was ordinary, domestic, the kind of evening that would have bored Lena to tears a year ago. Now it felt like everything. Later that night, after Clara had finally been convinced to go to bed, Lena and Ethan sat at the kitchen table with the ledger spread out between them. The numbers were marginally better than they'd been a year ago, but only marginally. The ranch was still barely breaking even. "We need to make some changes," Lena said, tapping the columns with her pencil. "We can't keep limping along like this." "What kind of changes?" "We need to diversify. Stop relying so heavily on cattle. Maybe plant some crops or raise chickens for eggs to sell in town. Or both. That's more work. Everything worth doing is more work. Ethan studied the numbers. You're right. We need something else bringing in income. The cattle alone aren't enough. They might be if we had more land, but we don't. And we can't afford to buy more, so we work with what we have.
When did you get so good at this? I've always been good at this. You just weren't paying attention. Fair enough. They worked late into the night, planning and calculating and arguing about the best approach. By the time they finally went to bed, they had a plan. It might not work, but at least it was something. At least they were trying. And trying, Lena had learned, was enough. The next Sunday, they went to town for church, all three of them dressed in their best clothes and walking into the small building with their heads high. They'd made it a habit, this weekly attendance, partly because it was good for Clara to see her father participating in community life, and partly because it was important to maintain their place in the town's social fabric. The service was long and dull as usual, the preacher droning on about duty and perseverance and trusting in higher powers. Lena listened with half an ear, more interested in watching Clara try not to fidget and Ethan try not to fall asleep. Afterward, they lingered outside while people filed past and clustered in small groups. This was the real value of church. Not the sermon, but the socializing. The chance to hear news, share information, maintain connections. Mary Miller waved them over to where she stood with a small group of women. Lena, I'm so glad you're here. We were just talking about the Harvest Festival next month. Would you be willing to help organize it? I thought Sarah Hutchins usually did that. She did, but she's decided she's too busy this year. Mary's tone suggested that too busy really meant still sulking about not being the center of attention. So we need someone else. And you're good at organizing things. Lena hesitated. Taking on more responsibility felt risky when they were already stretched thin, but it was also an opportunity to cement her place in the community, to show that she belonged not just as Ethan's wife, but as her own person. I'll do it, she said, but I'll need help. Of course. We'll all pitch in. They spent the next 20 minutes discussing logistics. Who would donate what? How they'd organize the various contests and activities, whether they could get a band from Rollins to come play for dancing. It was mundane work, but important. These were the ties that held a community together. On the ride home, Clara was practically bouncing in her seat with excitement. Can I help with the festival, please? What would you want to do? I could help set up, or I could run one of the game booths, or I could help serve food. You just want an excuse to eat pie. Is that a no? It's a yes. You can help, but you're also going to help prepare, not just show up the day of. I will, I promise. Ethan was smiling. She gets her enthusiasm from you. I'm not enthusiastic, I'm practical. You're both. It's one of the things I love about you. That simple statement, one of the things I love about you, made Lena's chest warm. After a year of marriage, she'd expected the declarations of love to become routine, expected the feeling to settle into something comfortable but unremarkable. Instead, it still caught her by surprise every time. Still felt new. Still mattered. The Harvest Festival was 6 weeks away, which meant 6 weeks of planning and preparing and coordinating with people who all had their own ideas about how things should be done. Lena threw herself into it with the same intensity she brought to everything else. Teaching Clara, managing the ranch accounts, learning to can vegetables for winter storage. Ethan watched her work herself to exhaustion and finally intervened on a Thursday evening when she was still awake at midnight, making lists by lamplight. You need to sleep, he said. I will. Just let me finish this. Lena, it's midnight. Whatever you're working on can wait until morning. But if I don't write it down now, I'll forget. He gently took the pencil from her hand. Then you'll remember tomorrow, or you won't, and someone else will think of it. The festival will happen whether or not you work yourself into the ground over it. I just want it to be good. I want people to see that I can do this. They already know you can do this. You don't have anything left to prove. Don't I? I'm still the mail-order bride who almost died, the crippled woman who can barely walk, the outsider who doesn't really belong. Who thinks that? Who said that? No one. Everyone. I don't know. She rubbed her face tiredly. I just feel like I'm always one step away from being told I'm not good enough. not strong enough, not worthy of this life. Ethan pulled her close. You are worthy. You're more than worthy, and anyone who can't see that isn't worth your time or energy. Easy to say, harder to believe. I know, but you don't have to believe it alone. I'll believe it for both of us until you catch up. She leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. This man who'd saved her life not once, but over and over, in ways big and small, who chose her daily even when she made it difficult, who saw past her sharp edges to the person underneath. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. Now come to bed before you fall asleep at the table and wake up with ink on your face. That happened one time. Twice. But who's counting? The festival turned out better than Lena had dared to hope. The weather cooperated. Sunny and warm, but not hot, with a breeze that kept things comfortable. People came from all over the territory, swelling Miller's Crossing's population to 3 times its normal size. And everything Lena had planned came together smoothly. There were competitions, pie baking, marksmanship, log splitting, horse racing. There were games for the children. There was music and dancing. There was enough food to feed twice the number of people who showed up. Clara helped all day without complaint, running errands and serving food and generally making herself useful. Lena watched her interact with other children her age, shy at first, then gradually opening up, and felt proud. A year ago, Clara had been so closed off, so careful not to let anyone too close. Now she was laughing and playing like a normal child. As the sun started to set and people gathered for the evening dance, Mary Miller found Lena and pulled her aside. This is wonderful, Mary said. Best festival we've had in years. Thank you. Everyone helped. You organized it. You made it happen. Give yourself some credit. I'm trying. Good. Because this town needs you, not just as Ethan's wife or Clara's mother, but as yourself, as Lena. You bring something we were missing. What's that? Backbone, intelligence, refusal to settle for good enough when better is possible. Mary smiled. We were getting complacent. You remind us we can do better. Later, when the dancing started, Ethan led Lena out onto the makeshift floor. Her leg was aching from being on it all day, but she didn't care. She wanted this moment, this dance, this community, this life. They moved slowly through the crowd, and people smiled at them as they passed. Not pitying smiles, not dutiful smiles, real ones. Lena finally believed what Ethan had been telling her all along. She belonged here. She'd earned her place. She was home. As the music played and the stars came out and Clara danced with a boy her age who made her laugh, Lena thought about the journey that had brought her here. The desperate flight from Boston, the broken wagon in the desert, the crawl that should have killed her, the months of recovery, the fight with Charles, the slow, difficult process of building a family from scratch. It had been hard. It had been painful. It had required more strength than she'd known she possessed. But standing here now, in Ethan's arms, surrounded by people who knew her and accepted her and valued her, Lena understood something fundamental. The hardest things were often the most worth doing. The most painful journeys often led to the most beautiful destinations. And sometimes you had to break completely before you could build yourself into something stronger. She'd broken in that desert, shattered into pieces that seemed impossible to put back together. But she'd done it anyway, with Ethan's help, with Clara's help, with her own stubborn refusal to give up. And what they'd built together was better than what she'd lost, better than she'd imagined, better than she'd thought she deserved. The music ended, and Ethan led her off the floor. Clara ran over, flushed and happy, and talking excitedly about the boy she'd been dancing with. His name is James, and his father owns the ranch north of here, and he knows how to rope cattle, and he wants to teach me. Does he now? Ethan said, his tone carefully neutral in the way of fathers everywhere confronted with their daughters' first crushes. He's just a friend, Pa. Don't get weird about it. I'm not getting weird. You're definitely getting weird, Lena confirmed. But that's allowed. It's in the father handbook. There's a handbook. Absolutely. Chapter 3 covers how to terrify your daughter's friends without actually saying anything threatening. I'll have to read that chapter. Pa! What? I'm educating myself. They walked back to the wagon together as the festival continued around them, and Lena felt a deep sense of contentment, not happiness, that was too simple a word for what she felt, but rightness.
The sense that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing, with exactly the people she was supposed to be with. That night, after they'd put Clara to bed and cleaned up from the day, Ethan and Lena sat on the porch one last time. It had been a year now since the wedding, a year of learning each other, a year of building something real. "Thank you," Lena said. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for seeing something worth saving when you found me in the desert, for choosing me every day since. Thank you for crawling, for refusing to die, for giving me and Clara a second chance at being a family." They sat in the comfortable silence they'd built together, and Lena thought about the future, about the crops they'd plant next spring, about the chickens they were planning to raise, about the possibility someday of a child of their own, about all the things that were still to come. The frontier had tried to kill her. It had broken her body and tested her spirit and pushed her to the absolute edge of what she could endure. But she'd survived. More than survived. She'd thrived. And sitting here now, with Ethan beside her and Clara safe inside, and a whole community that valued her, Lena understood the truth her father had never taught her, that Boston had never shown her, that she'd had to come to the edge of death to learn. Freedom wasn't given. It was taken. Love wasn't found. It was built. Home wasn't a place. It was a choice. And she'd chosen this. Every single day, she chose this. And she'd keep choosing it for as long as she had breath in her body and strength in her bones. Because this imperfect, difficult, beautiful life was exactly what she'd been crawling toward when she dragged herself through that desert. She just hadn't known it yet. But she knew it now. And that knowledge was worth everything she'd endured to earn it.